Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is ADA compliance for the police station. This is something we've been talking about for a number of years. We put money aside in the budget in capital planning to start the process. The police chief and Brian and Joe have been meeting. We have Pam Pospisil here as our architect for the project. Jimmy, you want to talk to it first?
And I don't mind doing that, just in much you've given a little bit of an introduction there already. I'm just going to grab my own notes. So this process, what I would say to the board, it started in 2002. And under a prior administration, we had hired the services of Pospisil and Brown to do some drawing and some work for us back in 2002. And that languished for many years, as I don't need to tell this board. In 2022, the town board budgeted and funded the PD and the town engineer to work on re-looking at access to the police department. In 2002, the process was both the police department and the justice court. And quite frankly, they don't usually get over to justice court unless they come through the police department first. And we have a ton of day-to-day traffic in and out of that building. So the board recognized that and thought it would be in our interest to take a look at this project from a police perspective first, and then we could build on it as we move forward. So fast forward now, we're in the 22-23, the town engineer, Joe Fenora, myself, and Pam Pospisil, who is here today. Sorry, I'm killing your name.
That's okay.
And got together. We went out with an RFP, so we put it out publicly. Pam's office had won that proposal, and we began work and reviewing our PD operation, public access to the PD, and custodial access, meaning if a person's in custody at the police department. So that process has kind of taken us to where we are today, and I'm skipping through some of it because I don't want to start with, because really today Pam's going to present, I'm going to have her come up here next, present what she has done in drawings and work, and then Joe at the end will talk through what our next steps are. So Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of talk about where we are today, and I know Christina has, and I presented to the rest of the board those plans through an email. Yes. Thank you for that.
Afternoon. I think one of the main differences between where we were 20 years ago and where we are today is that at that time, we were looking only at accessibility on the main level, how to get the public up to meet with a police officer, et cetera. The focus now is also on the lower level, which it was not in the past. So that's a big difference, and that has to do with bringing in suspects, et cetera. So as you know, the challenge with this building is that it is multiple levels within the building, not only the difference in grade to get up from outside. That poses, a pretty substantial challenge. If one can get up to the front door, that doesn't mean one can get and move around throughout the building. So the maybe most obvious solution would be a lift. But that isn't necessarily the best solution, because you need a lift from outside to get up to the main level or to the entry level, and then you would need a second lift to get up to the main level. So that got ruled out pretty quickly. And the difference in grade from from ground level to the main level is pretty substantial. You're talking about 4.5 to 5 feet. Which would require a ramp of approximately 60 feet long, not insubstantial. And I think we've all probably been past public buildings that have these big ramps, whether they be aluminum or wood or whatever, and they're not terribly attractive and or welcoming for the user. Sometimes they're a bit ominous, and people prefer to struggle to go up the steps than to take the easy route because it just doesn't look very easy or comfortable. So we tried to propose a solution that would not only be aesthetically pleasing, I mean, solve the problem, but not only be aesthetically pleasing, but also appropriate to the stature of the building. I mean, it's a public building on Main Street in our town. And so we want something that looks appropriate. And so what we chose to do, and you'll see this on the renderings, is to create a ramp entry that is in the same character of the building, using the same materials, made out of masonry and brick, and not just a zigzag, go up and come back and get in the building, but rather one that's sort of a pleasing experience. It wraps a vegetative area, planter, if you will, that could have a specimen tree in it, or perhaps the flagpole might move there. But it's also broken up into segments so that it's more comfortable for someone to use, but also has to meet the code, which limits the amount of run of a ramp that you can have before you have to have a landing to sort of catch one's breath. So we're proposing the ramp to start from the front of the building where there would be a designated parking space, and then one would take this journey, if you will, up to a now side door. And outside that side door, we could provide, or we're proposing to provide, a small patio area where one can pause, catch their breath, meet and greet somebody if they're, looking to before they head into the police station. There might be a teak bench where they can sit and sort of gather their wits about them, and then enter the building. Once one enters the building, and Christina, you might want to jump ahead to the plan. There's just a couple more renderings. Once one enters the building, one's in a lobby area, which will allow someone to go up to I'll call it a communication window, for lack of a better terminology, to speak with the clerk, say their gripe, ask for help, whatever. And that clerk is being relocated so that it's easily accessible from the lobby. From the lobby, one can also access a new handicap bathroom. And also, the location of the lobby still allows the front entrance of the building to function as it does today. So someone who chooses not to use the ramp can still go up the steps in the front door, up the steps, and now they're within a lobby space. The solution is satisfactory for not only the general public, but it is also satisfies if the police department should have a handicapped employee. They can now function on that level of the building. The changes are minimal to the exterior of the building, and they're minimal to the interior of the building. And I think that, is an important goal to cut, not only, also to cut costs. And then the second part of the accessibility issue is on the lower level. The next plan, please. The idea here is to utilize the existing vehicular ramp to bring a suspect down in the car to the flat sort of area right outside the building, have zero clearance doors that would bring you into that rear space, which is currently the interview room. And so a suspect could be brought in from the vehicle directly into the interview room and interviewed, processed there in that space. Now, should the person need to be held for a longer term of time, Chief Reed has arrangements with the sheriff's department.
And we have an MOU or developing an MOU with the sheriff's office so that if we had to hold somebody overnight, that they would come out and pick the person up and then bring them back. That helped us a lot. As most of you know, every level in the police department is either a step up or a step down. So we don't have to bring anybody to our holding cells, which would be 2 steps down. We have an arrangement now where we could utilize a bathroom, we could process and release in most cases, but process if we had to hold, then we would have to work with the sheriff's office for overnight lodging if that would need to be the case. And we would try to extend it as long as we could before we would do that, or hopefully work with our judges to meet at a sooner place. But if we needed to, we could do that. That helps us in not having to put somebody in our cells. And I think it will save the town money in making the basement more compliant by adding a bathroom so we can utilize the bathroom down there that's ADA compatible, and then process and release for the most part.
And what it does is also limit, there are masonry walls within the building. And so we're confining our work to the rear of the building, which is really all frame construction. So it's going to minimize the cost with the things we have to do to provide that bathroom and the interview room. And then the other thing that we've tried to accomplish here is the interview room, and there's an office that are side by side. And the interview room hopefully is used infrequently, and therefore it's dead space most of the time. So what we've done is created pocket doors between the two spaces so that the interview space could be used by an employee spreading out papers, doing their office work or whatever, at which time it needs to be used for a suspect. They can close those doors, and we now have two separate spaces. So briefly, that's what it's all about. And if you have questions, I'm happy to field them.
Any questions?
No, I like I love it, actually. I particularly love the side on the north side of the building, with the garden in the middle. I think one of the people that live here year round have always talked about the appearance of 114. So I think it goes that little bit more of enhancing the appearance of 114. And where we can, and we have a direct control over it, and that means town, we should do everything impossible to enhance the look of the center of town. That does it for me right there. It looks beautiful, and it's functional, and it's nicely done.
Jim, you hit on an important part. I looked back at some of the old files I have, and I went back to a 2002 letter that Pam had addressed to the then Supervisor Art Williams. And one of the things that Pam highlighted, and it was a nice thing for us as a municipality to work with somebody who is a professional but also resides here. Pam has expressed many a time that she's willing to help in architectural review to make our town what it should be, or present it the way it should be from a professional perspective. And I agree with you that she did that with that north side of the building.
The other comments are that the town has invested, not just now, but in the last, since the capital planning group has been together, and Jim and I are both on it with Amber and Joe and Brian, quite a bit of money in the buildings. They're about 85 years old. I think they're late 30s, 1938 vintage, somewhere around there. So they're 85 years of age now. But we've done all the outside work and window dressing and recorking of the, what do we call the masonry there, that repointing of the brick. So the appearance of those two buildings, they're old, but they are beautiful. I mean, they really are. They're worth keeping. And one of the things that we talked about too is that as a community, we're required by federal law, and Jim has brought this up on numerous times, and I think John Cronin did before Joe was on board, about the need to start to work on an ADA plan for the town. It's one thing just to talk about it. It's another thing to actually have a plan in place. And of course, the next step, of course, is start to implement the plan. And I think we've chosen the two buildings, both the police department and Justice Hall, as two buildings. And that's why, and I have to say, Amber was, when we were thinking about doing this, we wanted to go from one building to the next, with the idea that if we were going to do these improvements, it might be cheaper in the long run too, if we started to combine some of this work and try to knock off both buildings. That doesn't mean that, that the challenge of future boards will be to work on other town buildings. But two of the older buildings and the more historic buildings, the center of this town, I think you'll be able to go by it. They'll be functional. People will be able to access them in and out. And they'll be very usable. And I think it'll spruce up the entire center of town here, so I'm really happy about it. I love the design of the way it looks, I really do.
So if the board has no more questions of him, we were gonna defer to Joe now for next steps in our process, based on that RFP.
The next steps really are to solicit feedback from the board to be sure that this, this concept and the approach that we're taking is one that would continue to be supported. I think we're at a stage now where Pam has captured the objective of maintaining the aesthetic heritage of the structure and also improving significantly all of our functional goals that we've been given for ADA compliant issues. So that's really what we were trying to achieve today. Certainly, there's an opportunity for the public to participate if they, feel particularly strong about the design or the direction of the project. But this is not intended to be a crowdsourced type design project. And we'd like to move forward with creating design documents and getting this project shovel ready.
I think it looks good, and I think it makes for a very simple flow in the building itself. I think it's going to make it a little more user-friendly for people. So I like it, and I think it's a simple fix. It's slightly shifting a few walls, adding doors, but it's not a significant overhaul in the sense that you're going to be tearing down most of it.
Are you losing a big storage closet?
We have a storage closet in the basement that we're gonna shift into an old boiler room. So
Right,
that,
because there's a lot of stuff in there, isn't there? I mean, some of you, yeah, I think,
Taking care of.
yeah, so her office, we're in a collaborative project, if you want to call that now, on scanning many of the town clerk's older documents.
oh, wow.
We're using our animal control officer on our off downtime to work on that project, so we're hoping to move that along as this process moves forward.
Right, okay, good.
That's nice, Jim. That's great. People should know about that.
For the people that aren't really familiar with the building, where we're gonna have the new lobby and the ADA bathroom, that's, used to be the town clerk's office. And it has a big safe in it, we'll have to get out, but it has a lot of boxes that Jim just mentioned with digitizing.
And where do the prisoners go when you take them off island?
Yeah.
Where do the prisoners go when they take them off island?
To the sheriff's office.
Where's that? Oh, it's all the way in Riverhead, oh, okay.
Well, I think, Joe, what you're asking is commitment by the present town board. And I think, Amber's not here today, but she's obviously for this. She sits on the committee, the capital planning committee. And I would never think that we were going to spend this kind of money on these buildings to do all the work we've done in the past and do this kind of work without making a full commitment to move forward. So I think I think we're 100% behind this. I think it's a great start. And the one thing you got to remember is that, in fairness to the taxpayer, like anything else, the ADA compliance is something that's going to take perhaps a decade or more to accomplish. It's not going to be something where we're going to look at every building and we prioritize these two buildings because they're important. They were just not accessible by a lot of people. And it was important to get these two buildings up and running. But it's going to be a process, and this is a great start. And, it's a federal law. It's not something that you pick and choose. If you don't want to do something, you have to do it. So, I think we're 100% behind this.
And to be clear, we're not seeking a financial commitment for construction funding, but certainly a commitment in the in the concept to advance the design under the existing contract.
And one other thing I would point out too is that the block grants that Jim, we've talked about that at meetings, and Joe, we've talked about the block grants and what we asked for in a block grant, and we've gotten, 15,000, 10,000. And we asked for a much larger portion for next year with the idea that we could take the same concept and bring it over to Justice Hall and be able to fund it that way. So I just want the public to understand that the committee, the grants committee, capital planning committee will be actively looking for ways to help finance this, not just in the planning stage, but also in the implementation phase. So there might be monies available. If there are, that's our goal. Our goal is to, as a committee, is to try to defer these costs as much as possible and to make it, make them a go.
So Joe, just on the public side, so we're on the same page and they understand, dumb it down for me a little bit too. We're gonna take what Pam has done and try to push that out to get pricing, right? Ultimately, to get pricing,
Yes.
and then come back to the board
Right.
to say, this project is not this is what the pricing looks like, and then we would try to get funding from there and see how that process goes, right? So,
Yeah.
so our next steps really are to take this, the design work she's done, and then technically price that.
Yes.
Well, you have,
Pam's task specifically is to further develop the design so that we're working towards construction documents.
Yes.
And so the pricing and the construction budgeting part is something that we will handle internally between my office and the board as budget season comes around, also working with the grants committee. So really next steps for Pam are to advance this design effort with a priority to getting construction documents completed. Permittable documents.
to follow up on Jim's block grants, every year the town gets approximately $13,000 community development block grants, and then we have to find a way to use it and, justify it. And last year, the county said to Barbara Bloom, why don't you guys, get a significant project and apply for real money? That's what we're doing. Any other questions? Okay,
I think this looks good.
okay. Pam, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Pam.
Great job.
I noticed the chief's getting a big purpose too, by the way. I can explain. Okay, next on the list is signs on town property. Now, I have to confess, I thought this had to do with our legislation for shoulders on the road, shoulders of the road, but it's separate and distinct.
Correct.
This obviously came up during the referendum for housing, that there were signs put all over the place that maybe weren't in the proper places, so we felt, let's talk about it, let's see what should be done and what shouldn't be done, and let's hear from the public.
All right, well, first, let's just start with looking at our code. Go to 13327, it's within our zoning code, and go to the sign section. You go to 13327B, which says permitted signs in all zoning districts must be located on premises to which they apply. And you go to 5 of that section, and it speaks directly to signs on the public rights of way, providing information concerning religious services, service clubs, and community organizations. Such signs shall not exceed 4 square feet, and permission for placement of such signs shall be requested by letter to the town board. So, again, you would need town approval to put a sign in a right of way, but it would have to be concerning one of those 3 things: religious services, service clubs, or community organizations. Now,
Got a question? All right, so if I want to put a political sign outside of my house, technically that's the shoulder of the road.
if it's on your property, you're fine. If you're gonna put it into the shoulder, this would be triggered. If it,
So I have a question. But this looks like it's under the permanent sign section, so to speak, because below that it has 6 temporary
I
signs.
was getting to that. Okay.
The gun.
Yeah, no. So, okay, so you have 13327B5, which again, so, and it says permitted, not permanent. So it's permitted signs, so you have to get an approval.
No, I know it says permitted, but I feel like this part references permanent signs. That's why I thought, like, because there's a temporary sign section, I figured the top part was referencing.
Well, if you read the language, it says like providing information concerning religious services, service clubs, and community organizations. So it could be read to be, temporary or not.
The rules are after. No.
Calm down, you're
no.
huffing and puffing over there, you're interrupting.
No, after.
Yeah. So then we go to 13327.6, which is temporary signs, as you aptly noted. And then you go to 13327.6.
Look, it's here.
C, It says temporary signs or posters not exceeding 2 feet by 3 feet pertaining to events of general interest such as auctions, bazaars, benefits, community events, elections, outings, weddings, yard sales, similar events. Said sign shall be removed within 24 hours after the event. And so again, that deals with temporary signs. So you have that section. But then, in our infinite wisdom, we have another section of the code that deals with signs on town property. You go to 13330, operations on town-owned property. No operation shall be conducted on property owned or maintained by the town of Shelter Island, including placement of signs without a permit from the building inspector / zoning officer. So now we have arguably 3 sections that can deal with political signs. What I'm suggesting, what we do, because, you know, first of all, I'm sure the town appreciates the First Amendment and free discussion of political issues and not hindering that. So nobody's talking about political signs on private property. Subject of this is on town rights of way. What I'm suggesting is to follow suit of Brookhaven Town, which prohibits any and all signs on town rights of way, regardless if it's political, charitable. So we don't run into this issue, because whenever you're restricting signage, it has to be content neutral. You can't, have bias against certain organizations. And you're allowed to have like valid time, place, manner restrictions, but again, it has to be content neutral. The Court of Appeals in New York State and the Supreme Court have upheld the complete prohibition of signage on towns' rights of way. So I suggest that the town board consider that, and we change our town code so we don't have to worry about this in the future, that we don't have to worry about sign pollution and also being the referee between who can put what where. But you still have the outlet of your own personal property, put signage up. And in this day and age, with social media and things like that, it's not as important to have a sign in the right of way.
So the right of way would include the shoulders.
So my
Correct. So
property,
road-
That gets tricky because, where exactly is your property line? Does my sign straddle the property line? Pull my survey, prove the sign's not on my property. I feel like it's gonna create a bit of a mess.
But the alternative is us having signage all over the place, in places like you putting a sign in front of your house, your neighbor, you putting a sign in front of your neighbor's house in the right of way, it's not in front of my property, blah, 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 which we ran into. I think we can sort of come up with a blanket rule of 5-10 feet off the pavement. I'll work with the building department, highway department, and the chief to come up with something that's reasonable. But at the end of the day, if you're gonna issue a ticket, I would have to get a survey of the property and see, but hopefully we will not get that. I just think it's much better if we have a clear rule. There's no gray area, but for the one you just mentioned, and we just set it up that way.
I like from the edge of the pavement if that could be upheld legally.
Well, no. What we're gonna do is we'll just have a policy that we're not gonna enforce. If there's a sign on your property up until like 5 feet off of. So we don't have to get into, again, because the only way you can really determine if a sign is on private property
It's a survey.
is a survey.
Well, what about this? I mean, listen, we are talking about shoulders, we're talking about safety. So, it's a lawnmower's width, or, what is my lawnmower, 20 inches or 2 feet from the edge of the road, where a sign shouldn't be because it could impede your ability to get out of the way of traffic or seeing. So if that's the basis of the restriction, in other words, saying that, we're saying, no sign, even though it's your property, you can put a sign there, but you have to leave so that people have a place to go.
Get out of the road.
Yeah, a safety edge, I don't know.
Yeah, so Town of Brookhaven, their purpose was, the use of signs on public property creates unreasonable distractions to operators of motor vehicles, creates confusion with regard to traffic lights, signs, and signals, impairs visibility of pedestrians and motor vehicles, creates safety hazards to public, and then it goes into more community, detracts from the aesthetic character of buildings, sites, districts, and town as a whole. The proliferation of signs along rights of way detracts from the established character of adjoining properties in the neighborhood in which they have located and depreciates the value of said properties. So again, it's a safety issue, but it's also an aesthetic issue. Because we have received complaints of all the signage. You know, but again, they can have it on, people can have it on their property and exercise their First Amendment right on their property. And this goes for commercial businesses as well. They can put a sign on their property. It just takes out, again, the opportunity for what happened this last season.
So Stephen, I'm thinking about the curb on 114. We're going to West Neck. And we have the farmer's market puts a sign up, the 10K puts a sign up, 5K puts a sign up. You know, a lot of local events put signs up.
That would be prohibited.
Right.
Because again, we can't pick and choose who we allow to put signage in the right of way.
And how about yard sale signs?
Again, not in the right of way. We're not on the telephone. They could take out ads in the Suffolk Times, they could put social media, and they could put signage on their property.
A couple of comments. Number one is, there's a lot of abuse of the side of the road to begin with. Mostly with vegetation. I'm not talking grass, I'm talking shrubbery and privet heads and things like, hedges and things like that. So almost on every corner, a lot of these hedges go within 18 inches of the road, and they put signs between the hedge and the road. Obviously, putting a sign behind the hedge is not the answer. So there's a lot of that problem. I think the number one thing that I've heard from my 8 years of being on town board is more so than not is sign pollution. That we just are inundated with signs. That and when you really come to voting and you want to elect the right people, why can't we develop a change of attitude here on Shelter Island and say that if we felt that Meet the Candidates, one session of Meet the Candidates was not, sufficient, maybe put 2 or 3 of them on to educate the public. Why is it so important to put out 200 signs per candidate? And it becomes, I have more signs than you. That's how we elect people by?
No, that's how we take a poll.
Yeah, I guess it is. But in a way, if we really want to elect the right people that represent what you want represented, you got to get to know them. You don't get to know them through looking and passing at 200 signs that have your name, has your name on it. So I would like to, change the thinking here and say that whatever we can do to better inform the public about particularly a lot of these very controversial topics. How do you stand on these? You get up in front of the school auditorium, you're up there for, maybe an hour, you get a 5 or 6 or 7 questions asked of you, you have a couple of minutes, so you really get to know the candidate on their positions there. I don't think so. So my thing is to educate, if you want to find out about candidates, let's put them on Channel 22. Let's give them opportunity to get the public to find out more about how people stand on issues rather than signage.
But this impacts all signs.
It does.
Once you mention yard sales, I'm out. You can't tell me I can't drive around on a Saturday morning looking for, no, I'm just kidding.
Sell sign.
But this is interesting, that site at the corner of the West Neck, that's a privately owned piece of property.
Yes.
But people and apparently the owners don't object, or they're not in town, I don't know which.
So if it's private, this wouldn't be triggered.
It wouldn't be triggered.
Correct.
So,
PJ, that's the shoulder of the road.
oh, no, it's too close though, but if they went up on that big grassy area.
But then that's private property.
Yeah, it's private property.
So they're putting him in the shoulder, not necessarily
Oh,
property.
yeah.
So, the reason that this came up is because a longstanding gentleman's agreement, so to speak, between the parties somehow went out the window. So is it possible just to get the two parties together, sit them down and come up with rules of engagement, so to speak, and reconstitute the civil nature of things? I mean, I understand that signage law is a thing, but I mean, I feel like we could handle it without complicating the code.
Well, the code
But you
is
have
complicated.
roads.
I agree. Well, I do. I think that this is
Competing
clear that there's three different competing
But you have
legislations.
You have people who aren't necessarily,
That's true.
you know,
That's true. Then how do
the
you,
parties.
it would have to be the party regulating.
Right.
But, you know, just a suggestion, because I feel like this is going to impact year round, not just that one political season.
Right.
And that's done in other municipalities. There's a gentleman's agreement, but for women, what is it?
Yeah, I'm tired, so my brain wouldn't.
It's an agreement that, only on private property and it's down within a certain time period. That's not municipally imposed. But again, I'm just throwing it out as an option. The town board doesn't have to take it up, but
I think for the most part, people like yard sales and things like that, people do a pretty good job here. They're pretty cognizant of that. Have a yard sale on a Saturday and by Sunday afternoon, those signs are gone pretty much. Not always, but they do a pretty good job of policing their signs. It's the political signs that I think I go back to what Meg said. How about we get the main parties together and let's put a little bit of a limit on these things. There's nothing worse than traveling along the North Fork in the fall of an election season, and on one piece of property, there's 25 big signs. We're not talking about the small little signs, big signs, same name over and over and over and over again. I mean, it's just pollution. It's just not, I don't know. I just think it detracts from the whole experience of being out here in the East End. This is, again, I go back to my opening comments. You want to find out about candidates? More stuff in the paper, more opportunity on Channel 22, more opportunity at the school auditorium, get to know people, where they stand on issues. That to me is what should decide an election, not how many signs you put out. So, and I support Meg's thing. Let's go within reason here. It's just a waste of money and effort, and for what?
Can I just comment on a broader perspective?
Yes.
So we as a municipality allow, I'll just give you an easy example, the center median of town right here. And Bucks Baseball puts their sign up, right, the center median.
Yeah.
And so in just looking forward, if some other, let's call it a hate group, go to an extreme, wants to put their sign in the center median, and I'm not looking for an answer, why can the Bucks do that and I can't?
Right.
And so I do think that our sign law should cover that, on Veterans Day,
Sure.
right, we put a list, we put
The
a.
placards.
Right through that, and that is fine, I'm not saying that any of those are wrong.
Right.
But what we're gonna get pushed up against is some group that wants to put a sign out there that is not in the best interest of the municipality, and how do we say no to that?
It's a good point.
When there is no methodology for putting any of those signs up. So that's all I would share.
And that's why a blanket prohibition solves that issue. And again, arguably,
But there could be a town sanctioned or a town approved
Locations?
reset for that. So if the 10K was gonna put up signs on the shoulder, they would come to the town board and say, I wanna put these signs on the shoulder as long as they don't limit sight and limit visibility. So it's just a thought, just a thought.
the only thing we can't really run into that. And unfortunately, we do have in the code right now that you can go to the building inspector to get approval for a sign such as that. And not even the town board. So anyway, we gotta clean it up, the sign code, just to, get rid of the duplicity. And in doing so, just consider maybe a blanket prohibition, maybe not, but that's something, I just wanted to start the conversation today.
I'd like to go back to Meg's suggestion now of putting the political parties together, and maybe they can help work on this together, just for political signs. It doesn't cover everything, I get that. But it is a major problem.
Well, in the interim, while we work on this,
Correct, on other things, yeah.
there's 3 different things happening in this code, but
Absolutely.
I do think we can have that
Yeah, I think we can do that too.
conversation.
What's the next step?
Meg,
Yeah, so what I would think is we put it on for another work session. You guys think about it, see which direction you want to go, and then, I can propose some legislation. And then obviously it'd be set for public hearing and a public comment at that time.
yeah, I'd like to read through this more thoroughly and kind of figure out.
Yeah, I would,
Yeah, it's,
I would also like to do that. And that Brookhaven, if you could give us a copy of, provide that copy of that for us, I would appreciate that.
And what about, the police have that sign that they kind of move around the island?
That's a governmental sign, so the government could put government signs on government property.
Interesting, okay.
That's not gonna hurt that.
so town sanctioned events.
No.
Different.
Now you're getting a little.
No, these are the questions that are gonna come up.
But I'm saying traffic sign.
Right,
We
yeah.
can obviously put up on that.
Well, the sign will often say Bucks game tonight.
That sign.
Not that sign.
No. Oh, okay.
What about the buck sign? Then that wouldn't be allowed either.
No,
They'd have to get permission to put it somewhere else.
on someone's private property. I'm sure they would, people would allow them. Like
Playground.
town clerk just said, school property, ask them to put it on it.
All right, do we want to take comments now or wait till the end?
No, the end.
Okay, wait till the end. Okay, next on the list is wetlands local law update.
The business one first, since there are a whole bunch of business owners here and we don't want to.
Good idea, Mitch.
Okay, business on town property. We have 11 applications for businesses on town property. A lot of them are repeat, 1 or 2 new ones. Stephen, you want to? Amber, wants to walk us?
Amber, we had that review, right? Did everything come in that needed to?
Still coming.
It's still coming.
Everyone was aware of what they need to submit. Some, I think 2 submitted updated insurance listing the town as the code insured. Others are just waiting for health department.
Or agricultural, I guess.
Agriculture.
Yeah.
I think we have to follow up on that. Karen's here, so we'll just.
Yeah.
So the only one where we have 2 businesses that are the same is the launch service at Crescent Beach. We have the Ride Shore LLC, which has been, them or someone like that has been doing it for years, bringing people that anchor out the day into the beach. Then Sunset Beach would like to have a launch service, or the ability to have a launch service, not that they 100% want it, but they want to know that they can.
That's for their private, they've like. their
That's for
private
themselves,
guests.
yeah,
so
if-
say
yeah.
they have,
Well, that's a good distinction.
so someone staying at Sunset Beach, so forth, party
That's-
event
That's Sunset Beach.
for them, not outside.
Right, although I wonder, should we even be considering Sunset Beach's application because of the timeliness of its presentation to the town? Lack of timeliness.
So we received it late.
Yeah.
Just be direct about it. It's a late application. Got it.
I think we'd have to look at. This is one of those double-edged sword. You could say pre-existing non-conforming business, it might be an expansion, but it's also, that beach is deeded to Sunset Beach, and we need to know what it says. When the Krauses,
I don't know, deeded to Sunset
when
Beach?
when the Krauses sold the beach to the town, it was deeded that whatever business was there would always,
They have an easement over a portion of the beach there.
Right,
Which I'm looking for.
an easement to land a boat or to build a dock
Build
or
a
both?
dock and store boats.
Right, store boats.
Correct.
Okay.
But I'm trying to find the survey that shows the actual, because we have a meets and bounds, but I don't have anything visually.
Would it be appropriate, Jim, that we meet with Sunset Beach, which we have the annual meeting in your office, that we discuss this, to get better clarity? Because, there's certain.
They have a survey.
I did have a conversation with the manager. as Amber said, that they were looking for limited access. VIPs coming in, they would send a launch out for them. Their other customers would come by a ride share. So I just wanted the ability, is my understanding, to occasionally go out, take with their own launch, pick up a VIP customer and come in, not to do general service.
Right, okay,
So we.
yeah, yeah. But sometimes we ask for things. Could be a little bit of a bargaining chip in terms of, you know, what we're bargaining back and forth on. What we want to see.
While late, I don't know that we should dismiss the
Okay.
timeliness.
Yeah,
Okay, that's the only actually conflicting business.
I don't have a.
We have the massage tent's been here.
Very limited.
Food truck's been here. We have a second food truck. They'd like to go to Wade's Beach. We have the Ice Pop beverage van. Mr. Softy ice cream truck. I guess that's similar to the Ice Pops, but I think we discussed that that's not really a business on the beach unless they have to get a parking permit. I would leave that.
Which one?
Like, Mr. Softy can't park in a parking spot.
I told him he could tell me that, beach parking.
Okay.
But the ice pop and beverage van is gonna be for Wade's, right?
Well, no, it's for the whole island, so it's not like they're planting themselves in one
All
spot,
right. okay.
you know. The Echo Discovery was outdoor education. Kayak rental was to use the end of Burns Road.
Yep.
Venture Out is the stand-up paddles at the beach. And Shelter Island Taxi had asked for a spot at Crescent Beach, but I don't think we.
It's so busy right at that intersection. I feel like it's too much to designate a spot just for a taxi, because you just get so many people coming through and picking up people and leaving and,
Yeah, we don't want to lose any spaces,
yeah.
general public. The only area is sort of in an area that's, right at the crosswalk,
Right.
which people do use to kind of like pull over, drop off, pick up, and that's actually probably a good thing because everybody's going slow, there's stop signs, everybody's aware. But to have it to have it
Designated.
bogarted or designated by a
Sunset, again, that might be something at Sunset Beach, if they had a designated area within the parking lot.
They don't want that.
They don't want that, okay, so that's, all right.
Everything is the nine.
And the only other thing we have to make sure is the positioning of the food truck now that the pavilion's there. Make sure that it's not like right in front of the pavilion.
Yeah.
All right, so are we waiting for somebody still to?
I think, Karen, did you guys want to say? Did you want to say anything?
Karen, I think we were waiting for, I know you sent the vehicle insurance, but we need some kind of,
Yes, I applied for
Come,
that,
come, come.
but
No, just say who you are, so the people on Zoom.
Karen Springer, and I applied for the popsicles and beverage. So I applied for the insurance, but because it's seasonal, they couldn't give it to me right away. So this week they're gonna give it to me.
that's fine.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to ask you is because, last year when Mr. Softy and we were in the same spot, is like for me was pointless to be there. So I don't know if it's any hours of difference that we're gonna be going to the beaches, because that will be like I
They're just kind
usually,
of traveling around.
yeah, because
He can't be standalone, we decided that, right?
Right.
It's not gonna, he can't be parked at one spot
Yeah,
for a long period of time, he has to be moving.
moving, right?
I think
so he drives my truck. So
it was like a constant back and forth.
Yeah,
So it wasn't just there, it was you stayed there, or we'd pull up and he'd pull up and stay, and then we'd move, and then he would move. So it was like.
And it was all
And
day
when we
long.
tried to discuss it with him, he said, what he said, I bought my truck this year, I'm trying to make money, I'm not going anywhere.
because
Which we understand, we don't,
Yeah.
and that's why we do this process of getting permits.
Because I mentioned he, what if you come a certain hour, so I come different hours, so we don't stay the same place? But he disagreed with that. And then I think all day long on the island, we need like for the people, the residents, like for the businesses here, like the ice cream shops here, for me, I just go for hours, but for me, it's like side job, so I can stay with my kids and so I think it will limit it.
Mr. Softy from the island or?
Yes,
From the island? Okay.
And I don't think that, if we're gonna give a
I thought we had restrictions that we were gonna give to Mr. Salty at Crescent Beach, that he would have.
Parallel
He
parking.
would have to stop, go to the parallel portion of the road with the window facing the beach.
Right.
Water side, so the
Right.
children, and if he stopped behind any of the diagonal parking or obstructed the roadway, we'd either ask him to move or ticket him for staying.
yeah.
So, we were going to restrict his. Where yours, you have a beach sticker, you can pull into a spot along the beach at Crescent Beach, is my understanding.
Yeah, but the
Your
same thing,
operation
if
is
we're gonna,
pulling into a spot.
but if we don't set hours, then we're gonna be.
Or days.
Or days.
Yeah, so what they're bringing up is a
Also-
conflict of businesses, which we're trying to stay away from.
And also, I don't drive in the houses. I just go there a couple hours during the day and that's it. So I don't go to all around the island.
Is it impossible to get the two parties together before the season and work out some type of schedule?
I don't wanna be in the middle of it.
No, I don't want, not us. I'm saying the two parties,
I think
not
I'm gonna
us.
stay the way he's doing it, driving around the island, because I don't wanna do that. But in the beaches, I think being all day long by the beach, it will limit like the other two ice cream places on the island. And
can I say something? I'm the Mr.
Sure.
Softy.
Yep.
Yeah, she's selling the popsicle, I'm selling the soft ice cream.
I'm not going through each one. Yeah,
We get that.
it's not the exact same product.
So Chief,
Similarities.
It's
What
not
if-
the same exact products.
So Chief, I just want to make sure, because you said, Karen can get a permit. He can get a permit too.
So
we don't wanna-
our decision was, we were gonna deny him a permit to pull into a diagonal
But it's
spot.
too big.
We're denying that.
Right,
We're gonna allow him to park in the parallel spots.
right.
We also did not see the conflict in interest, although they're expressing one, so I think we kind of moved past that. And they're gonna have to deal with that and move on. So Mr. Softy can go to the parallel spots, he'll sell from outside the window, he can move around the island like he normally does, as any ice cream vendor would do.
Right.
He'll also be in a designated spot at Wade's Beach when he goes down there.
Same with,
And so the question to the board, that my understanding is, they're expressing a conflict of interest that they'd like you to address.
right,
I don't think it's our purview to do that.
yeah. And I see your product as I see it as different. I
it
mean,
is different, but
you're healthy and not.
Of course, the kids are gonna go in the other side, and of course, the parents are gonna say, oh, I go there and I go here.
Yeah.
So basically, when we were together at the beach, everybody went there. So I was just,
Go back to what I said 5 minutes ago. Can the two parties on your own get together and create a schedule, days, hours? Does it help? You want to maximize both of the businesses. Isn't it your best interest to get together and work this thing out?
Be at different beaches at different
I
times.
understand that's
Are you
why I
going to
spoke with
Wade's?
him
That's what I
last
said.
year.
Are you going to Wade's? Are you using Wade's at all?
Yeah.
So, yeah, Mr. Softy and Ms. Springer, I think the town board really would like you to work this out.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, and as Jim said, it's in your interest to work it out.
Yes.
To have an alternating, you could do it by the hour, I don't know, but, by the day.
Yeah, whatever. I think if the two of you got together, I'm sure you could come up with a viable.
But in general, I think, in my opinion, an ice cream truck all day long on Shelter Island, it would be bad for the ice cream places on the island. It limit, because we do have a lot of people on the summer, but not everybody's gonna eat 3 times
We are
ice cream.
limited to people in the summer
But
too.
yes, and we, the residents that live here, is like, we try to make money in the summer to.
Make you through the winter.
Yes, and my understanding is, I think Mr. Softy also go to other towns. I think he comes from Greenport or,
Yeah, he takes North Ferry.
so it will be, is like limited for us.
And to reverse it, what if
And
we
I-
had 10,000 vegan ice pop trucks on Long Island following Mr. Softy? He's got to understand why we're a little concerned with this is such a small.
And the reason I
Venues,
say this is because last year, we actually got together with the other ice cream places. And that was the opinion. It was very hard for the businesses last year in the 2 weeks that he was standing
Right.
at the beach.
Right. Well, pricing could be an issue too for the island ice cream shops. I'm just on a personal level saying that. Also, you know, in terms of your argument, the Islander sells ice pops. And so they're a brick and mortar. And should we give them preference over you? Now you're competing with them. That's where it kind of gets a little difficult and impossible for us to be in the middle, really, because everybody,
But the food truck is more food.
yeah.
So
And it doesn't move, it's only.
Yeah. Right, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
It's in that designated spot.
But the argument that he comes over from, well, and then the other argument could be, well, they're brick and mortar and, you know, I mean, that's where I'm trying to say, it just gets so convoluted, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But thank you for keeping us abreast.
Comment on the signs quick, maybe like a 30-day Institute for Elections and Votes, 30 days. You can only have a sign 30 days for it.
So the only other ones that we haven't really discussed is the taxi. But how do we want to, we're just going to deny it?
Yeah, we're not going to designate it as
All
stand.
right. And we did have one more, but it
Are we in?
really wasn't for business on town property.
Okay, so, we might, so we had discussed restrictions. So take your garbage out. Somebody had asked for a shed. Should that all just be handled administratively?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote
Well, I
that,
think we tell them they have to take their garbage out.
brought it
Yeah.
aware to
Right.
the last conversation we had. And then when I was reaching out for more information, I noted that to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we should put in writing? I don't know.
I think we should be very clear on.
Very clear, right?
They absolutely have to be very,
Yes.
very
I
clear.
thought it was in the resolution. I think.
Yeah, I put it, all the restrictions, whatever.
Okay.
And the resolution,
Right.
so that way,
Okay.
Okay.
um,
Okay.
And enforceable.
it's no turning back.
All right, now we'll go back to wetlands. We closed the hearing on wetlands update. We had a window for written comments. That's over.
It ended a week ago.
So now we will have our discussion. I asked Christina to sell me on this because I'm not 100% sure of it, and she and Meg put a document together. So take it over.
We thank you for it because it is very, very helpful.
So the first thing to start with is the flow chart. And one of the issues, or one of the big issues that we come up against is that this is a significant administrative burden, the way it's organized right now. So, the process starts the same for everyone. You submit an application to the building department, the application's reviewed, and you get a letter of denial notifying you that you need a wetlands application or a wetlands permit. So from there, currently, you go and you submit your application to the town board. And so then it goes to the town clerk. They receive the wetlands permit application. From there, it gets sent back to the building department, so it's another clerk. And the building department reviews the application for completeness. And then it goes back to the town clerk. And from there, the town clerk distributes it to the CAC, the town board, and the planning board, adding 2 more clerks. So now we have 3 groups of people who are reviewing the application, the planning board, and the CAC and the town board. And so then the town board sets the public hearing. The public hearing process goes through. The town attorney drafts the resolution, the town board adopts the resolution, the town clerk issues the wetlands permit, and then the applicant files with the building department, and then the building department signs off on compliance of the wetlands application permit that, and issues a CFO. And if for some reason someone disagrees with the restrictions or conditions of the resolution that's executed by the town board, then their only recourse is to file an Article 78. That's just the way that process goes. So the process we're proposing starts with the applicant submitting to the building department.
No, planning.
No, building department getting a letter of denial.
Oh, way up top.
I'm going right back to the beginning, Jerry. And then it goes to the planning board. So from there, the planning board clerk really handles the process, and the planning board handles the process. So you have submissions of the wetlands permit to the planning board. The planning board, their engineer, they review for completeness. So like the planning board clerk would do an initial review to make sure all the documents are there. And then the planning board has an engineer that they would use to make sure that the technical aspects are accurate, and they would write a memo to the planning board. Then the planning board clerk would issue a copy of the application to the CAC. So then you just have the planning board clerk and the CAC clerk involved. And so the CAC does their deep environmental review of the application. The planning board does their review of the application. The planning board sets the hearing. The CAC issues a memo to the planning board with all their recommendations. The public hearing is noticed the same way as it's noticed now. Then the planning board holds the public hearing. They discuss the application. The planning board attorney drafts the resolution. The planning board adopts the resolutions and issues the wetlands permit. The applicant files with the building department for the permit. And before they can close out and get their C of O, if there's a component to the application that requires a vegetative buffer that has very specific design features and, has very specific grasses and plants and whatever, then the planning board environmentalist would sign off on compliance to make sure everything was done correctly. And then the building department would issue their C of O. And that's done. So it's
Who is the planning board environmentalist?
It would be a consultant they could use.
Okay.
So the planning board has that regulatory authority. They're allowed to hire consultants. They're allowed to consult experts. And so just like with the current process, this process, if the applicant doesn't agree with the conditions of their, permit, then Article 78 is the only recourse. So, the way we're doing it now requires 5 different clerks, multiple chances, and this document going all over town hall into different buildings. There's a lot of opportunity for pieces to get lost, for pieces to be changed or added throughout the process, so that maybe people who saw the project at one phase don't see the final. Like, there's just so many ways for errors to happen in the current process. That, for many reasons, transferring the planning board makes sense in that sense. So just in that. Does anyone have any questions about the flow?
Just comments, about, maybe we should go, what's proposed. We know what we have in place right now, and we're looking at the difference with what's proposed. On the planning board, we currently have 2 liaisons from the town board, you and Amber.
Yep.
All right? Is there any possibility, I'm looking for something a little bit hybrid in here, so, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
the two of you are intimately involved with the planning board. So there is representation of the town board at the planning board level. I always have said, whether it's the CAC or the planning board, the most important part of this process, other than getting the application completed, and having it all complete when it comes to us, is a site visit. I noticed when we go down here, education for everybody, the CAC will not have all 5 or 7 members of the CAC actually visit the site. I know in the past, the planning board usually assigns certain members of the planning board, right, that they would go to this site. Of course, you may have multiple sites that you have to see in between meetings, so you kind of divvy that up a little bit. I think the more eyes that you have on a particular site, particularly when it's a controversial site involving wetlands, the better it is. So I'm thinking, if it's just not really too controversial and doesn't involve wetlands of any major substance, that's one thing. But as soon as you have some significant wetlands problems, issues that need to be addressed, maybe having additional members of the planning board make that visit or having both liaisons actually make it to site visit. And the other thing about site visits, I'm just throwing this out. Sometimes I know with the CAC, the chairman will say, we're looking to go on a particular day. But not everybody on the CAC can actually meet 5 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon or Monday morning at 9 a.m. to go to a site visit. So they go when they can. It's a volunteer type of thing. But actually having a group of people, and I know when we go as a group, the town board, we do a visit to a particular problem. It's always better when we go together, maybe with the town attorney or the town engineer sometimes, because collectively, when we go to a site, we all see different things, and we start a dialogue right there about certain stuff at the site. And I think that's a critical part, no matter what avenue you go. To me, the site visit is of utmost importance. And having town board representation at the site visit is important to me. I just throw that out for whatever it's worth.
Okay, well, the planning board currently does site visits, so does CAC, and the planning board, they go in teams of 2, so as to not create a quorum on site. So, they'll send 2 at a time, and they'll go when it's convenient for them.
So Meg, you have on the current 2 planning board members assigned, and then on the proposed planning board members, so you're
Right.
saying the whole planning board.
So, yeah, they would all go at different times, so that everybody gets eyes on the site. And then,
Let me just interject on that one point. So open meetings law would suggest that if a quorum is on the site at the same time, that constitutes a meeting if you're going to discuss the application. So you can't really do that. However, there are other opinions that say you can go travel in the van together, go on site, do your own thing, don't talk about it, and then get in the van and come back. So I would advise against the quorum going
Together.
Yeah.
But they should all go.
they should
Oh,
go
yeah, absolutely.
at their convenience. And it's one of those things where if they just say, hey, we're going to come and view your property on Mondays and Tuesdays between, and just give the homeowner a heads up. That's what we always emailed before we went out, just let them know we were coming. So, then you get people on site looking at the property. And so that way, when they come back to the table and they look at the application, they can have a solid conversation about it. They all know what they're looking at. They've all been there. They can all read the plans. They all understand.
Is this hearing closed?
Yes,
Yes.
So no public comment.
right.
And
At the end of the meeting.
But they can't really speak to the application
No.
because we're not supposed to be taking that.
And the correspondence on it was ended last week, so I just wanted to make that clear.
Questions? Are you saying there's not going to be a comment period at the end?
Yes, there's going to be a comment period at the end.
Yes, but they really shouldn't be.
It's closed.
speaking In this particular situation.
Yeah, not on the
This
wetlands.
local law,
We closed the hearing.
because you're not supposed to take any of that
I
into.
thought public comments were public comments.
The record is closed, and you're not supposed to take anything into account.
How is it possible that this can evolve and be discussed in a completely
Michael, please.
different way than the past?
Let us try to resolve this.
It was closed April 4th, left open for a week for written comment, which ended April 11th.
Right.
You can let, sir, please stop.
It is materially different.
Sir, when you can let them speak on it, but you can't take it into account. If you want to let them go through the motions, they can go through the motions.
Okay.
I want to also say that I think that the town liaison should not be weighing in if this gets adopted. In other words, then it becomes a separate and independent.
That's correct, yeah, it would be, because that's the way the planning board.
And we were advised by legal
It's
counsel
like the
that,
zoning board.
exactly, that's just what I was going to say, we shouldn't be involved with the zoning and planning boards. Right.
Okay, all right.
That involvement, I'm not sure.
Take us through the questions?
Yeah, so then I just want to go through the code itself. So if you have it in front of you, because I have made notes and additions and things of that nature.
This is in SharePoint?
Oh, yeah, it is in SharePoint. It was emailed to you guys too. I don't know if it's still in there.
We still making comments?
Yeah, if you have more.
So I'm going halfway down the page on the right-hand side on the proposed where it says the planning board attorney drafts the resolution.
Mhm.
And then the planning board adopts the resolution and issues the wetlands permit. Can there be some type of safeguard? I'm just throwing it out there because I'm kind of looking for some type of checks and balances here, that the town board can review and discuss the resolution before it's actually adopted by them.
No, to use the planning board, or the town board, yeah.
Because I have notes on this, because the planning board, let's see, where to go. Okay.
Where in the code is he? Resolution. I'm just trying to address the concerns that I've heard in the past about having checks and balances and having elected officials being able to weigh in on a resolution. We didn't draft the resolution, but I would like, as an elected official, to be able to look at that resolution and to get any amendments that have to be done, that I have that opportunity to be able to do that. I don't need to be part of the entire process.
It's a slippery slope, Jim.
It is, I get it.
It's the same with the zoning board. You want to review their decisions?
Right, that's the problem, like the way the planning board is set up, the legislation from the state that sets up the planning board sets it up as an independent entity. And they are not to be checked by the town board or other agencies, just like we don't go in and tell the zoning board, hey, that was a bad ruling, we don't like it. That's not our jurisdiction, they're independent. So like if someone has a problem with the zoning board ruling, they take it up with Article 78. Same thing with the planning board in a subdivision process. If someone doesn't like the way that goes, that's their recourse. Just like with the planning board or the town board approves something, someone doesn't like it, it's the same recourse because they're three independent bodies.
They're independent, however, the public always has an opportunity to petition the town board to make the wetlands law stronger.
Well, and that's where it should be done, is in the law, in the code.
So if there's something that's going on that the public doesn't like, they can petition the town board, bring it to their attention and say, hey, can we make an amendment to solve X? And then also, it can be delegated to the planning board. You see a couple years and it could always be reevaluated.
Right.
If the fears are coming true.
So I follow that logic, Stephen, and I appreciate that, and I think the people who are identifying wetlands as potentially a key factor moving forward for Shelter Island, because they're all over the place. They're the wetlands, and they're very, very important to the welfare of this community, and they serve a multitude of purposes. And there's always been the law is not white and black. There's a lot of gray in between about whether you allow this or you don't allow that. So if I'm going to go along with something like this, I have to have assurances beforehand that there's much more respect for the 75-foot and the 100-foot before I relinquish any of my responsibility here to the wetlands. That's all I'm saying. I think that's so.
Well, that's where I'd like to get into the code itself, because I have some suggestions.
Just one more point before you get into
Yeah.
that. So I just did a little more research into other municipalities and what they do, what's the state's perspective on it. The New York Department of State Office of Planning and Development, they put out a model code for wetlands. And they modeled it after the town of Pauling, which the planning board is the board that has jurisdiction over wetlands. Also town of Phillipstown, which it's a conservation board, has full authority. So it's not even the planning board, it's another independent entity. Again, Southampton uses the conservation board, and I'm sure Southampton has a premium on their wetlands as well. And they give it to a conservation board, which if you look at the hierarchy, you have town board, planning board, zoning board, and then you have the conservation board. So again, from the state down, they acknowledge it, that, and again, it's far and few between that I found that the town board is actually the one that listens to these.
Right.
And when I did find them, it was only, they divvied it up into different categories, and then like the highest category may or may not even go to. And they would, like, that town was Brookhaven, and Brookhaven delegates a lot of it just to the director of environment to approve. So again, this isn't something that was just taken out of whole cloth. There is precedent for it, and I think it's even the appropriate body to hear it, but.
Yeah, I mean, in East Hampton, it goes to the planning board or the ZBA. Southwold, it's a board of trustees that's independent from the town board. And Riverhead says CAC issued recommendations to the building department, and there's no public hearing. So.
No public hearing?
No. So it's
Yeah.
not inappropriate for
Right.
this transfer.
Meg, you're going to review the code now. I also, there are some notes to the objections that were raised. Are we going to get to that after the code then? Great.
Yeah, I have some notes and comments on this too.
Yeah, okay.
So just going through the code itself, because I don't know, I mean, we haven't really gone through it section by section. So Article 2, permits. I thought it might be helpful where everywhere it says permit, to put wetlands permit, because I feel like people, that it's not just a wetlands permit, but a building permit. I just don't need a permit, or I need what kind of permit? So there's 3 places where I added wetlands before permit, and this is right before the chart.
Yeah.
So right before the key, there's any regulated activity for which a wetlands permit is required, which is carried out without a wetlands permit or in violation of the conditions of a wetlands permit, is a violation of this code. I know it sounds silly.
No.
But I think redundancy is key. And so then in the chart, we do have a change that is actually strengthening some of the wetlands protection. So at the bottom of the chart in the clearing, where it says clearing, and then except for clearing authorized under 129-3B, which is like invasives and things of that nature. It used to be that a permit required, and now it's that it's not allowed.
Period.
So it's no longer permitted, which I think is a good thing to point out. And then the other thing that's come up is demolition. So the question of, people look at it and they say, and the reason why wetlands permit in front of those permit words is important is because of this one here, demolition. It's a wetlands permit that we're requiring, not the demolition permit from the building department is still required. But so just the concept here is that, this is saying you don't need a wetlands permit to remove something from that area, but you're still required to get a demolition permit. And so, the thought and the logic behind that is that if it's something simple, if it's something that is like that pre-existing 100-square-foot gazebo in the front, that people should be able to remove that without going through the entire wetlands process, because then they have a tendency to ask for more. So maybe we need to be more specific in exactly what we mean when we say you don't need a demolition permit for XYZ, for removing something 150 square feet or less, or something more specific like that. So, if you have like a playground that's in the wetland setback and it's like, no, you got to get that out of there.
Right.
They have to go and get an entire wetlands permit to remove the playground.
Which think a building
seems
permit is
like-
necessary.
right.
But not a wetlands permit for things of certain size.
Right, and
I
so.
think we should put that.
Yeah, I think the confusion comes in, people say, wait, someone doesn't have to get a wetlands permit to demo a house in the wetlands? No, they would need a wetlands permit to demo a house. It's a significant thing if it's a significant intrusion. The concern and the reason why this came up was for some of those smaller things that are just non-compliant, make it easier for people to remedy that. So,
Let me just inject here. Reed put on the record that septic systems, for instance, don't require a demo permit. If we're going to make significant substantive changes to this proposed change, I recommend we go back to the default provision, what was the codes, or a permit is required, do a subsequent amendment after the fact. Because if you want to make that change, arguably, we're going to have to renotice this, have another public hearing, and start from it.
right.
So.
But so that's why I'm bringing it up. So my final comment on here was that we could maintain the status quo
Yes.
and readdress that specifically. Because I think that there are a lot of things in here that need to be strengthened or clarified, but I think that,
Yeah, because I think if we go back to the
Yeah.
status quo, then I can work with Reed and the working group to determine what is that carve out,
right,
where you wouldn't need a full-blown wetlands.
right, because I do think that's going to be more of a discussion. But I think that could be a solution for this, making it easier for people to remedy things that were done illegally in the past or just
Yeah.
they just happen to, age out. So, the recommendation was possibly keep that as it is and then really like dig into it and come up with a better modification later. And just, I wanted to point out that G under 129-3G says any activity which is not required to obtain a wetlands permit is still subject to all other permit requirements. Because I know in some of the letters we received, there was some confusion, like, wait, now you don't need a permit at all? No, you still have to get all the permits, like the DEC if it's required, the building department, whatever is required, you have to get. Okay, and then the 100 square foot exemption, H right below that. So the wetlands permit exemption for new construction less than or equal to 100 square feet is a cumulative exemption of all accumulated construction totaling 100 square feet or less, and is in addition to any construction that predates July 20th, 2001, the adoption of this chapter. So, one of the arguments is that the building department has trouble tracking. If you do a one-time exemption, you're allowed to do this 100 square feet now. The building department has trouble tracking how many times that's been used or how to use it. And, pre-existing versus new construction. So, the other question there is this something that we want to look into deeper before we make this change? Is it going to make it harder? Like, I'm reading this and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's allowing an additional 100 square feet to any construction that also predates this law. So you could already have 150 foot in that wetlands, and then you're entitled to another 100 feet. So I think that is
Yes.
part of the problem.
What I recommend is we treat this similarly, keep it.
Maintain status quo,
Status quo and revisit that in a subsequent amendment
right,
if it's warranted and people want to do it.
yeah, okay. All right. So the next thing I have is the EAF.
Right.
So this is a concern that a lot of people brought up, eliminating the EAF. I have no problem keeping it in.
Keeping in the elimination.
No.
Keeping
just
the EAF.
keeping
Requiring the
EAF.
Okay.
And it does make people kind of analyze their project, look through it. It doesn't.
Think about it.
Yeah, it makes people think.
Yeah.
So, granted, most of the time, people don't use the EAF mapper, they don't do it correctly, but the planning board knows how to check that.
Right. The idea is, I think Ian has mentioned this, most of the time the EAF is not filled out by the owner.
No, it's by whoever the contractor.
And if it's not filled out correctly, kick it back. Make sure it is filled out correctly.
That's the option.
And in the model code, it does require a full EAF. So I think that should remain in.
Yeah,
And again, we can have future conversations about the utility of it, but I think keep it in is a good idea.
yeah,
If we can go to the 129.4.1, the one before the EAF,
yes,
because we put in here, including a delineated wetlands boundary flagged by a credentialed environmentalist within 5 years of submission of the application. I think this is another thing that should be revisited in a future amendment, is that just like where having an environmental consultant at the end, make sure the plantings were done correctly and it's paid for by the applicant. I think we have it on the front end and have a wetland boundary flagging done at the outset by a consultant paid for by the applicant. It's like $350 to have it done.
Yeah, my only concern with that is the logistics of timing, because sometimes it's really hard to get a surveyor to come out, and you can be waiting forever, and then you start your application process and there's delays. So if we put like a hard timeline on it, it's kind of, I mean, I know you don't want it too old because wetlands change,
Yes.
and like, so maybe something within a year or a year and a half.
But what we can do is have just a flagging application that people know, well, I know in like 6 months I'm going to ask for this, or 5 months, whatever, and have the flagging done. There's enough lead time for the survey to be on. Also, we've allowed site plans by applicants, so they could take the survey, an architect or an engineer,
Right.
and slot that onto a site plan. So, I think that's something that should be considered, because we don't have a full-time environmentalist on staff. Other towns do, and they have that done. So like in Southampton, the applicant goes in, the town comes out, flags it.
Right.
And if you don't like that flag, then the applicant hires their own, and then there's a battle of the flags in front of whatever it's the conservation board over there. But I think you have to have accurate information, fresh information, and to have that at the outset is very important. So I think we need to think about including it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm not opposed to that. Okay.
So we would be changing, or whenever we can talk about timing.
Right, so maybe with the 5 years, how would that change?
129-4A, Brent's 1, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah, but we can keep it as is, and then, because again, arguably, I don't necessarily think that's a major substantive change. It might be because of the burden on the applicant.
Yeah.
But, so I think we keep what's in the law, and then we, again, have that working group that adds that to the list of amendments that we can do in the next couple of months.
Well, I think we'll have to make a decision here about whether or not we're talking about doing enough or so many amendments at a later date that we don't make these changes now and renotice it and
Rehear it.
But again, you can segment the transfer of approval authority to the strengthening of the substantive provisions. So you have procedural and you have substantive.
Right, right,
so-
okay.
So,
To consider, all right.
okay. So if we were to just keep it at status quo, it would be a current certified survey prepared by a licensed surveyor showing the information set forth in the application form approved by the planning board. Right? It wouldn't have the part about the licensed architect, landscape architect, engineer based on a certified survey. Would you be cutting that portion out? Looking at the underlined version, the 129-41
Oh, yeah, no, everything that's underlined,
would stay.
yes. So it's bolstering it, but we would just add the requirement of this environmental consultant at the outset. So that would be in a subsequent amendment.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, this is post, that's,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
And then just the next item, let's see. Item 3, so 29-43. That's just another provision that is strengthening protections and increases enforcement of the vegetative buffer, really, and the wetlands. So that's asking for a vegetative plan from a licensed design professional. And then it's also requiring that,
So, okay, yeah,
so I don't have any issue, I don't see how that could be
a bad thing.
a concern, yeah.
But how about the meaning of new construction in that? Vegetative plan must be submitted for any proposal which involves new construction. So
That's in the original code.
So, but new construction, is it a rebuild? Could it be a rebuild? Significant, a
construction,
significant addition?
No, it's anything that's within that 100-foot regulated area is new construction. Anything that you're adding.
Okay,
Right.
all right. And that's
Anything
clear.
not pre-existing.
No questioning the way I just did it.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and then the other one that comes up is the proof of insurance. So, people are questioning why we were thinking to remove this proof of insurance. And, the information we've gotten from other attorneys is that it's not typically required during the permitting process. Like the contractor who does the work has liability insurance and they're licensed with the town. It's not typically required at the permitting stage of a project. But I mean, we can keep it in if it's a concern for people.
Yeah, our broker said it's not necessary, but again, it's been in there, and if it would satiate some concerns, it's not.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know how people feel about that.
I actually wouldn't, I don't see the harm in keeping it,
Okay.
you know?
And then point C, 2 down, is really just just restating the fact that DEC is required before they can move forward, or Suffolk County Department of Health is required before they can move forward with the application. So, it's saying that no wetland permit applications will be reviewed unless it's also provided with approvals from the DEC and the Department of Health, if that applies. And one thing in there is that the Army Corps doesn't review wetlands applications, they just do docks and bulkheads. So if it's just a wetlands application, Army Corps is not going to be checked on that, but the DEC will. If it's a wetlands in conjunction with the dock or bulkhead, then Army Corps would be checked off too.
And typically they're filing a joint application.
Right.
So it's to DEC and Army Corps, and if the Army Corps feels they have jurisdiction, they take it.
Right. So, I mean, that's all covered in that. It's just stated a little cleaner, I think. And then point D, any application for wetlands permit shall be subject to coordinated review with the Department of Environmental Conservation in accordance with the lead agency agreement executed June 20th, 1983. So the planning board already has full authority to be the designated lead for SECRA in things that they do. So in the subdivision process, in lot line adjustments, they're SECRA, and we can designate that authority to them because they're a regulating board.
Yeah, I just want to update the board. I did some research, and there's case law that deems the designation of a permanent lead agency prohibited. So we have to remove that from the code anyway. It's not allowed.
Oh, okay.
So that 1983 lead agency agreement is moot.
Okay.
Next week? No, just kidding.
All right, so then that comes out.
Yeah, again, that might have to be based on notice, and since the hearings closed beyond our second round of amendments.
Okay. Notes? So then my next notes are in the hearing portion. So E2, if you keep flipping. On or before the commencement of the public hearing, the applicant shall file a radius map and an affidavit with the postal receipts annexed thereto confirming mailing of said notices. So this is just part of the public notice process. And you don't necessarily need a professional to do that mapping because you can do it for free in GIS. You can, you just do your property and then it gives you the addresses to mail to. So, I mean, that's the public notice portion. and transparency because all of your neighbors are notified personally. And then you also have to put signs up, letting everybody in your neighborhood know what's happening. So, I mean, I think that this is transparent and notice is given. And then just down to G, do we want to keep the insurance? So that was a yes. What else did I have?
I looked at quite a few.
And then, let's see. So then one of the last things I have is 129-5, criteria for permit issuance. So we've added C, which increases the protections on the wetlands by having the town's environmental consultant come in and check and make sure that everything was done according to the permit. And so that we know that the buffer was restored as it was supposed to, or installed as it was supposed to, and that they didn't outside of the permit. And that's done prior to the building inspector issuing a certificate of compliance. So that's just an added protection included in this. So let's see. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the comments, and we've gotten comments from Shelter Island Heights property owners, the Shelter Island Association. Who is this? This one is just respectively, I don't know who that's from. Deborah Grayson. So there's a whole bunch. There's one here, it wasn't signed. I don't know who it was from. I'm thinking, oh, Pam. I think it was Pam. So we have the one from Pam. So some of the concerns that were brought up, I made more notes because that's just the way my brain was working this weekend. Some of the concerns are that we're weakening the law, we're weakening the protections
Of the wetlands, right.
But in this, I actually think that, if we keep the EAF, we keep the demolition as it's currently standing, we add the flagging of the wetlands boundaries, we add the final review by the environmental professionals, and then there's the new condition in the chart where, no, you're not allowed to clear. So that kind of adds protections to the wetlands. Then there was also the concern conflict of interest possibly in the planning board, but I think there could be conflict of interest anywhere in a small town. So, I mean, my solution for that is, well, there's a number of things. One, I don't think that the recusal rate is what people think it is when it comes to conflict, because it's really the same. Yeah, we compared it to zoning board and planning board. So in the past 5 years, the planning board looked at 56 applications, and there were 2 recusals in those 5 years. And that represents 3.6% of all the applications in 5 years. And that's the same for the ZBA. So there were actually, and that was only one member in the planning board who had to recuse, and that was only twice. And then for the ZBA, there was one member who had to recuse themselves twice. And then there was another member who had to recuse themselves twice in that same 5-year period. So, I don't think that it's uncommon that every once in a while you're going to have a recusal in some of our boards and committees. I do think that a possible solution for that is appointing alternates to those boards.
Yeah.
And so by state law, we're allowed to appoint an alternate for the planning board and alternate for the zoning board. So that if recusal comes up or they have issues with quorum or whatever it is, then that person can step in. So that might be something that we want to consider in order to kind of alleviate that potential for conflict of interest. I kind of think we should do it anyway, just so that you get new people interested and involved in some of these boards. And then, when someone chooses to retire or maybe they're not reappointed, then you have someone that can fill that space and then you get another alternate in and they can start learning the ropes. So I think
With our remote restrictions.
Right.
In the off season.
Right. Our open meetings law complications with Zooming and being in person. So that's kind of how I would recommend handling that specific issue. And then there's another argument that's been made that the planning board doesn't have a marine biologist or planning or environmental expertise. But, they have their own engineer on staff. And the CAC really acts as their environmental experts. So the CAC is going to give their recommendations to the planning board, and then, those two boards working together will come up with the resolution. It's really just, it's so much cleaner that way. Because what I find, or what makes me uncomfortable with the process as it currently stands, is that you have the CAC doing their thing, you have the planning board doing their thing, and then we get it, but we have so much on our plate that it's hard to do a really thorough review of all the information we're getting. So we get a good presentation at the meeting, we get the notes from the CAC, we get the notes from the planning board, and I don't know that we have the time to dedicate to a super comprehensive review, which is what these wetlands applications deserve. And I think that a board like the planning board that doesn't have a heavy caseload, and, that's kind of part of the issue, is like, they need some work, let's give them work. We're paying them, let's have them work. They're well outfitted to do this because they have the expertise on board. It can be a direct conversation between the CAC and planning board at the meetings. And, I think you will get a better review out of the planning board process if we do it this way.
Meg, the one we're on now, the argument is that the planning board doesn't have marine biology, planning, and environmental expertise. Could you read number 2?
Currently, the town board does not possess any mentioned additional expertise. They fully rely on the planning board and the CAC. And we virtually always just follow the planning board recommendations. And so, part of the problem is that the way it's set up now, if we're the top of the food chain, it complicates the entire process administratively because we have to be in charge of all the paperwork. So everything has to come back to us at some point. If the planning board's in charge, then it's streamlined and it's not going to be as messy and things aren't going to get lost and mistakes aren't going to be made as much because it's one person managing all of it instead of 3 departments juggling.
Well, it's also this idea where I got hung up I have got hung up a couple of times, is versions.
Right.
Versions.
Yeah.
And that in paper flow, when you have multiple versions, becomes pretty messy.
And part of the issue too is that, the buck stops with us, but right now you'll have the CAC recognizes that something's missing from the application. Then the planning board recognizes something's missing from the application, but everything has to get to us before we can say, hey, this is missing from the application, go back to the drawing board.
Right.
And that's a problem. It's, because at that point, you have a hearing set, you've got, and then, nope, now you got to go start over again because we need an updated version of this. You need 2-foot elevations, you need, and so I think this really eliminates a lot of those mistakes that we're currently making.
Yeah. And time delays, not, there's I got a little bit of a sense that somehow if you're applying for a wetlands application, you're sort of a little less than, there's a little bit of a, in other words, why would we want to why would we want to make the process smoother? Why would we, they shouldn't even be asking for a wetlands.
I don't think delays in the process equal a more thorough review.
That's what I think too.
I think delays in the process equal a more costly process. And I think that it comes with its own pitfalls. Yeah. It's like the more levels you add, exponentially more complicated it becomes, and we have one level too many complications. So the argument for outsourcing the review and additional cost to the town, I actually don't think there's going to be significant costs to the town because I think we're going to be saving costs in the fact that we're not going to be utilizing 5 clerks. It's just the 2. And the hours that people will save and trying to juggle these will be better served doing other tasks. So I don't think there's any reduction in how much time or work people need to spend on this.
Likewise, if the planning board attorney is doing work, we should put that into the fee structure.
Exactly. What are my other notes? The elimination of the demolition permit we discussed already. The 100 square foot exemption we discussed. Elimination of EAF, we'll keep that in. We discussed that, same with liability insurance. I swear I'm almost done. Okay, so then there was a misconception that, an applicant could proceed without Suffolk County Department of Health approval, and that's just incorrect. before an application gets reviewed in this new process, it has to have Suffolk County Department of Health approval and DEC approval, same as it always has. And then the argument that the process is being fast-tracked, I do not believe that's true. It's pretty much the same process. It's just done more efficiently, and it uses town services more efficiently. Because right now, it is a significant burden.
Right, I mean, one thing that I remember was mentioned that the public hearing is less a marquee event when it happens at the planning board versus the town board. That's bothersome. If planning board, if this wetlands applications are important to you as a citizen, then make them important to you as a citizen, check the website. We're also going to working on a notify me, which would help also with that. If you are interested, we will email you, hopefully in the next few months, by the end of the year. We will notify you when a hearing that you're interested in is coming up by sending you agendas, not by saying this hearing.
And the other thing is, it's notified in the paper, just like all the town board hearings. It's, on the website. None of this is hidden. It's all open to the public. And, there's the argument, well, the newspaper doesn't cover those meetings. Okay, there's been nothing to cover at the planning board meetings. It's just been like, okay, there's a subdivision's been going on for 3 years. We're almost there, guys. It'll come through. We'll get that final paperwork. So, once if you build it, they will come. If the wetlands applications are at the planning board and people care about them, they will go to the meetings. You will put pressure on the planning board to, review them the way they want them reviewed. And so I don't see that as being a problem. Let's see. What else do I have on here? We talked about flagging. The last one. Did I miss anything? You guys
No, I
have
don't think
anything?
no, I'm just waiting to see.
Very exhaustive.
Comment, but
Not exhausting, exhaustive. It was very exhaustive.
Can be both, that's okay.
Town government, this is how the sausage is made, Bob.
Transparency. Thinking out loud.
I think I've almost done. Oh, and then there was one confusion about whether or not the planning board engineer was going to write the denial letter, and that's not the case. So the denial letter is still issued by the building department. But the problem right now is that the building department issues the denial letter, and then the applicant applies for the wetlands permit, and it goes back to the building department for them to assess the application for completeness. So, is that sort of a conflict in and of itself? I've denied your application, but now I'm going to say if it's right and then send it forward. So it kind of eliminates that quirk. Because now the building department writes the denial letter and the planning board takes it from there. Yeah, so, I think that's all I got on this.
So at the end of this, then, you have comment, Jim. I have more of a question. We have some changes
Yeah.
from the proposed. And yes, I understand we can come back to it later. Is there any advantage to,
that's where I'm going.
is there any advantage to just redo,
Yeah,
or separating it out, which we can't do?
yeah, I
can't
think after the,
move the authorization over and deal with all these separate things later.
No, you absolutely can.
You can?
You can do just the authorization and all the substantive.
no,
I mean,
you could do it either way.
written
As written? Oh,
I want to.
that makes sense?
I want to speak on that very point.
Yeah.
Because I waited patiently for Meg to finish and I.
I appreciate that, Jim, thank you.
And, no, God knows I've dominated that.
so now you know how it feels, Jim.
I know how it feels. There are two questions here. Now, one is the process and one is the code. And, do you approve the process, change, and then amend the code? Or do you amend the code and then, and I'm a little bit more in favor, and I'm glad you brought it up, BJ, because that's exactly where I was going with this. The confidence level of people that are questioning and I've heard it from the CAC, again, I'm not on the planning board, never been on the planning board, I've been on the CAC for a long period of time, but the one echo that I've heard from a number of chairmen and a number of people who have served there is about why can't we strengthen the code? Why can't we put more teeth into the code? So in listening here today, we got a great education on process and the advantages of changing process. The confidence that the people want is the change in the code and the respect for wetlands. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I'm leaning a little bit more towards, I'd like to get them both done, but in confidence for the people, what they would like to see us have, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm misreading it. But to take care of all of those things that we pointed out that would strengthen and give greater respect for the wetlands and then change it over, the process. You could do it the other way around. I personally favor taking care of business first.
But the vast majority are in the code, like the strength, like you reiterated.
Right, those strengths we would keep in the code.
Right.
So I'm more in favor of transferring the process
got
and then
that.
doing a deep dive into the code, because quite frankly, I don't have the time to spend reviewing all these applications to the depth that they need to be reviewed and work on strengthening the code too. Like,
All right, that's an argument.
there's only so much, and I personally, this is just me speaking, I think that these applications need to be taken seriously and need an intense vetting. And I feel like as a town board member with so much on our plates, we're not the right place to do that. I don't feel like I have enough time to dedicate to these, and I do spend time going through all of them, but I still feel like I'm going to miss things because I'm still getting pulled in a million directions. So I honestly feel that you're going to get a more thorough, comprehensive review with this suggested process.
Totally agree with that statement. Totally agree with everything.
And I would love to dedicate my time to working on strengthening the code that then has to be followed by the planning board and the applicants and so I think that's where you make the most impact, is fixing the code. But in order to fix the code, I need the time. So this is that catch.
So it's go forward with this then, as is, and then make these.
And then tackle the wetlands code.
Yeah.
Again, you have the transfer, you have some strengthen changes. And then we have that working group to do the rest.
Right.
And that's just what I would like to do. Of course, you all have a say. And Amber, when she watches this poor thing, she can figure it out. She can come up to her own conclusion. She's going to be so tired after tax season, she's going to fall asleep watching this. But so that's just my take on it.
Yeah, no. In terms of workload, I lean to agreeing with you.
And just from a practical standpoint, the burden on the clerk's office is so significant. All the clerks, I mean, building department, town clerk, Christina, and then you have the committee clerks, and it's so hard to coordinate and organize when all the meetings need to happen, because you get 45 days to review. Okay, 45 days then leads us to where's the town board meeting? Oh, we scheduled the meeting, you have now 10 days, get your stuff sorted. It's so inefficient and it's so chaotic. It's really hard to wrangle. And then people get upset because they don't have what they should have, but,
Right. Everybody complains about red tape and bureaucracy. But when we're, come up with a pretty rational solution to a little teeny corner of that.
yeah.
Okay, so just real quick summary. You're recommending we keep the EAF and the insurance.
Yep,
You're recommending we keep the demolition.
yep,
You're recommending the wetlands be flagged by a credentialed environmentalist and also a final review.
correct.
Approved. And
Insurance.
we do prohibit clearing in this new law. But what about, just thought of something else that I just.
That exemption,
Yeah,
that stays the same.
okay.
Yeah. And that's for, invasives and things of that nature.
500,000 insurance.
Right.
So, okay.
So it's,
Run the clip, and I hate to go to do this.
Yeah.
Run the clip by me one more time, because I think one of the things that I've heard over and over expressed by the public is this massive clearing of property before, again, I know if it's under an acre, it's,
Well, this is just wetlands we're talking about.
Yeah, we just talked about
Within
wetland.
100 feet
Yeah.
is no clearing allowed.
Okay,
That's for invasive.
all right.
right, and it used to be you could get a permit to clear that area, but we've eliminated that option.
Okay.
So there is no permit to clear the wetlands area, that 0 to 100 feet.
Except invasives.
Right, except for invasives.
And it
And so
was-
if you have the environmental, flag it ahead of time, that sort of also could, well, I would perceive, they help keep that, people clear necessary,
Absolutely.
Right? Because the
Yeah,
eyes have been on it.
Exactly.
It's been flagged.
Yes.
All right, I kind of like that a lot.
The only reason I bring that up is because before coming here today, I stopped to visit her property, and I noticed that when I stepped it off and I walked out to the edge of the wetlands, that looked to me that there was a 10-foot change in the wetlands, that somebody went out and cut the wetlands, and it dried up, and it made it look like it wasn't wetlands, and maybe they're trying to squeeze that extra 10 feet in. So that was just came to my attention as I walked out there today, looking at that, and just said, there's.
Was it wetlands or in the permitted
No, it was-
area?
No, it was wetlands.
And it also clears up an inconsistency between the chart and the code. The chart said permit required, but then the code said you can't get a permit because you can't do clearing. So it just cleans that up and just makes it crystal clear that you're not allowed to clear within the 100 feet. We do have to maybe jump into an executive session then, because we have at least at 3:15, we have to jump into an
I
executive.
don't know if we're gonna make that.
No, but what you can do is jump into executive and then reopen.
Well, I mean,
Let's
this
keep
is,
going and we'll cross
Yeah.
that bridge.
You won't?
so I'm pretty much done with this. So, just,
In the room, in the room on Zoom.
what time is it? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's at 3:30.
Okay, we have two people signed up to speak. We doing board member reports?
Let's skip the board member reports and let's see if
We
we
can
can.
do public comment first,
Yeah.
unless you want. I mean, we have a CPAC meeting Monday.
We could do, let's do this. Let's
And then we can do comment. Yeah.
then go into executive session and come back out and do board member reports.
Right.
Okay?
Correct.
All right, so the first one is Ian McDonald. Did you want to speak, Ian?
I didn't sign up.
No.
Oh, okay. I thought it was an attendance
Yes, you
sheet.
did. Okay, Bob Cohen,
I'm speaking on two different subjects. Do I get?
you got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Press for time.
Okay, on the wetlands first, I think Meg listed all these straw men that she properly knocked down, except the suggestion that I had, which I sent a letter this morning on, which I know is past the comment period, but it just summarized my suggestion that you could simply have the process where the planning board does the work, you don't get involved in the details, you do the public hearing, and the only thing you have to review is whether the process, if someone complains, whether the process was a fair and due process with no conflicts, et cetera, and you'd accomplish the same thing. And I'd urge you to do that before you change the code to take over this responsibility to a lower level. On the Mr. Softy, I love Mr. Softy.
Really, Bob?
But I'm not buying from that guy.
Whoa.
Okay, number 3, signage. May not be here. On the signage, I feel partly responsible for the discussion on this subject, so I'd like to offer a solution to it. And it's the solution that I commend Meg for bringing up, which was to first have the two committees, party committees on the island talk about the etiquette of this. When I put my signs out, I wasn't aware of the etiquette. I wasn't part of the committees, and I assume other people weren't. Assemblyman Thiel had signs all over town property, et cetera. I think that the town attorney I don't agree with him at all. I don't think the current code is ambiguous at all. It's pretty clear that they're talking about required signs and permitted signs, and then there's permanent signs and temporary signs. The permanent signs are like street names. private, no trespassing, set signs of the ferry, et cetera, signs on public rights of way by organizations, but that's a permanent sign by the Quakers or the Lions Club. Those are the signs that are along the public rights of way. Those are permanent signs. It's a separate section, as Meg mentioned earlier, for temporary signs, real estate signs. And then there's the whole list of construction signs and temporary signs like benefits and auctions, et cetera, et cetera. I wouldn't want to see the town change so much that we don't see that 10K sign or that tag sale sign, or even during the election period where you have election signs, because that's part of Americana. I don't think it's fair, I don't think it's legal, by the way, to say that, well, we can allow it on town property. If it's within 10 feet, we're not going to enforce it. That's not legal whatsoever. That would give some people who have parts of their property adjacent to a town road more speech than people who don't have the kinds of areas where they live, maybe out on Ram Island as opposed to town center or along 114. You can't give people more speech and other people less speech.
Not more speak, okay.
So yeah, it would be, I'm afraid, I think that would be unfair. So the other thing, so I don't think it's enforceable, an enforcement nightmare for the police. And I do think that the two committees can come together and say, and I'm part of the committee now, and I'm a little more familiar with the issue, that we should limit political signs to like 3 weeks or 2 weeks before the election, as opposed to this whole long period where you start seeing them at the primary and they last throughout November and you see it during the summer. That's not a good thing. There's also unfairness. Someone I heard took one of my signs, my community.
Please, Bob, 3 minutes are up.
Someone took my sign and put it in front of somebody's house on town property because it was next to the highway. And I got a call from the town attorney saying, hey, can we pick up that sign? I said, absolutely. I didn't put that sign out. Somebody had gotten the sign for me and put the sign on it. I thought it was terribly unfair. That's like fraud, okay? You're making someone else look like, okay. It's what I'm saying, but the town committees can basically get together and solve those kinds of problems before you change the entire face of this town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are the only two that signed up. Anybody else?
Yes, please. Comment to Jim and to the town board.
Just identify, Mike.
Michael Shatkin, thank you. The town board does control a tremendous amount with regard to the wetlands. First, and the most important thing you can do is write the legislation. Second, you get to pick and vet the people that are on the planning board itself. And third, you get to bring the appropriate resources to the table to have appropriate wetlands reviews. There is a complete lack of confidence in the process within the town. And the reason for it is the credibility of the current review process. Looking first at the town board, what we see is a town board that doesn't do legislation and bring people to the table, does not act as leaders, but are way in the weeds and actually doing the work of the reviews. In every other community, there's a planning board. And the advantage of having a planning board is it has the bandwidth and the expertise to work on this. You guys are trying to do everything, and it's too big and too complex of an environment for you guys to be doing that. So I'm going to make this short and sweet. The thing that you can do now is bring the appropriate resources to the table. And the appropriate resources would be to have an environmentalist, either in the form of a planner or some other environmental firm, do what is done in other communities. And all you have to do is spend a little bit of time watching the proceedings of the communities in which some of the professionals in this town operate, not just here, but in the surrounding communities. And what I see, I'll take East Hampton as an example. I go before that committee on an issue, and the planner stands there and summarizes the case which is before the board, and it summarizes the law. And that is the crux of the matter. And that is the resource which we do not bring to the process, because we are using lay people rather than professionals to do this process. And there's always the issue of who's going to pay for this. And again, I bring the examples of other communities. Who is going to pay for this is the applicant. Because the applicant is coming in the door and asking for something. And there's plenty of precedents in other communities where you make an application, you put a deposit for professional reviews, it gets drawn down and it goes to the point where there's no longer money in that deposit. Bank, you replenish it. So it's $0, zero consumption, and it's the highest form of expertise coming to the table, not generalists. The last point I would like to make is that the planning board, as in its current form, and their friends and neighbors and everything else, that they have gone on record of not being able to differentiate the value between turf grass and vegetative buffer. That is their official position that they've written to you, Jerry, and to the town board at large
Ask you to wrap it up, please.
in the past.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Howard?
Yes, I'm Howard Johansson. Megan, I appreciate your help on all of that. That's very good. And I'm going through that whole thing I went through. And I think what it turns out to be is that we should keep what we have, basically. The only objection I had is this flow chart dated April 5th, which is after the close of the hearing, and was only posted on the website last night or this morning. I think this one was on there, like 7. So we had no chance to review this flow chart, which we were told that the hearing would be given to us. So I don't know how that hearing could be closed at that time without all the information we were promised at that hearing being in our hands.
You were promised by who? Who said that?
By the
Well, I mean, the process is outlined in the code itself. This is just a visual aid to help understand the process. So, I mean, I made this up to help explain the differences between what we currently do and what the new code was proposing. So, I mean, it's all outlined in the code as you read it, but this just makes it more, easier to follow.
Yeah, I agree with that, but we were told we would have this before the final process. And if I'm incorrect on that, I'm correct, but that's what my understanding was. And it's very valuable information. It should have been given to us before the hearing was closed.
Howard, I think it was brought up that it would be good to have a flow chart, and Meg made one. I don't think we committed to have it, before we did it.
I brought it up last week.
Right,
I
right.
brought it up asking, I said
Yeah.
it would be a tremendous asset to be able to see what we currently do and what.
I'll go back and look at the records, but the other thing is, I don't know who the engineer is on the planning board. Maybe Ian can.
Joe
You don't mind
Lombardi from the
if I-
Rayner Group.
It's Joe Lombardi from the Rayner Group.
So that engineer, is he on the planning board?
He's our staff. He's not on the planning board. He works for the planning board.
He works for them. So we're adding an additional fee to the.
He is already on the planning board. He attends every meeting because he's assists with subdivisions, lot line changes, and everything else we do.
Does he go to the site?
He doesn't go to the site, and we're not planning to have him go to the site.
You're not planning to have, or you are planning or not?
We are not. We don't doesn't currently go to the site for wetlands reviews. We're not planning on having unless it's something that's really merited.
Well, I think it's very important that either an engineer from the group goes. I know you have 2 people assigned, which is very good. We have 7 people on our committee, maybe 5 of us go, which is good. And I think that's John Longo.
Joe Lombardi. from
Joe,
the
oh,
Rayner
Joe.
Group. Joe Lombardi from the Rayner Group.
Okay. That's right.
We form a team of 2, but more than 2 members go to every job site.
I would think so.
Projects.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to go in bigger groups.
No, right, because of quorum.
Okay,
That's section 36.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Howard.
Thanks, Howard.
Anybody else? Okay,
Pam Demarest just put her hand.
oh, I'm sorry. Pam?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. So this discussion seems as if the only thing that you've addressed in the intent and purpose of this new legislation is to take care of the clearing section of the law. I don't really see how you've enhanced the process in any way. And now you're going to table the 100-foot exemption. Those were the three things that were part of the intent of this law. All of the other things that have been discussed now you're going to table. And honestly, I don't know what this law looks like now. And I'm going to agree with Howard that the new information on that flow chart on how it was processed through the planning board was not part of the discussion at the public hearings. And I have made a request that you consider reopening the public hearing on this law. And now that you've made so many different changes, we're keeping this, we'll look at that later. I really think you should either reopen the public hearing on this so we can look at the flow chart and get more opinions put before you, or table this legislation and start all over again. I really don't see how saving money on a couple of clerks' salaries is going to offset the money that's going to be having to afford the applicant to hire the planning board attorney at her hourly rate and the planning board engineer at his hourly rate. And I'm still not clear now who's doing the denial letter, because during the public hearing, it was discussed that the planning board engineer would be going to do a disapproval letter. Hold on, just a disapproval letter, and that he was going to do that. And now you're saying, no, it's still going to go through the building department. This has just all become so confusing. And now segmentating this to say, well, we'll just pass the process to the planning board when everyone I've heard from has said, we want you elected officials to make the final decision. And the difference in time frame is basically one town board work session to get the process onto the next level to you to review as a final review is not an inconvenience to the applicant. And the point of the wetland code is to protect the wetlands, not protect the applicant. We're not here to protect the applicant. We're here to protect the environment. We're here to do the right thing. And I am going to ask you again to open the public hearing or table this legislation and start again. Thank you.
Pam. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yep, more.
Let's gotta make it quick because we have to.
We have actually an appointment, yeah.
I agree with Pam that maybe you should reopen that hearing, and if this was dated April 5th, then it was available.
Can I just make a real quick comment on that, Bob? This is not part of the law. This is just informational information.
Yeah, I think the issue is transparency, and I think that's the real issue that needs to be
This is
addressed.
outlining this so everyone understands it
Correct.
better.
Yeah.
And it was a vehicle for the town board to understand it.
Yeah, but the other thing that Pam had said, you had the Shelter Island Heights Association against this. You had the Shelter Island Association against this, and they actually placed an ad and spent money to put it in the paper. Everyone who's spoken, except Michael Shapkin, and was against this. And one of the candidates for the town board wrote a letter to the editor against this. We haven't heard a lot of people in the community in favor of this. Now, we all appreciate the burden that the board takes to do these wetlands. And what I suggest is, when you don't take, when a mooring permit comes into your attention, you don't jump through hoops and ladders, to get an investigation, unless somebody comes to the town hearing, or the public hearing, and objects to this particular mooring. What I was suggesting is, you don't have to change much. You leave it with the planning board, let them make the recommendation, let them do all of the work that you would normally do. And when it gets to you, limit your review to the process, as long as that it was not arbitrary, no conflicts of interest. Because what Jim was saying earlier, your feeling at the beginning of this is that you still feel that you should let people have a level of appeal before filing a lawsuit against the town. If I was a neighbor and someone doing next door to me something to the wetlands, you're telling me I've got to file a lawsuit if I don't agree with the planning board. The second thing for me to do instead would be to come to the town board meeting, to the public hearing, and say, hey, that process was wrong because I think something went out, conflict of interest or whatever it is. you review the conflict of interest. You don't have to go back to see a de novo review, as we call it in the law, from the beginning of the wetlands process. As long as you trust that the guy at the planning board got his job right and he wrote a 2-page report that explained that decision, you should rely on what he did and say, okay, there was no conflicts of interest, the process was good, we're going to approve it, public hearing over, and then you approve it. That's all you have to be part of, is the process, deciding on the process to keep the decision in your hands. And people feel that this wetlands issue, I'm not a scientist, but is extremely important for the environment. I was convinced of that over the past couple of years living here, and I think it should remain with the town board. I just don't, I think you're going to accomplish everything Meg suggested by following my suggestion and the compromise I suggested.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
Sounds
it's
like
okay.
more bureaucracy, Bob.
No.
You're arguing for more bureaucracy. Yeah, we gotta.
We have an appointment.
Something like that. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to recess the work session to go into executive session. Thanks, everybody.
Discuss the employment history of.
We're going to reconvene the work session to do board member reports, then hear from the public. Meg?
All right, so we had a comp plan meeting last night, and we have another one coming up on Monday, the 24th, and we're going to be discussing the the environment chapter. So that's going to be 6:30, Monday, the 24th. It's available on Zoom or here in person, and we're going to talk about the environmental chapter, which is on the website. You can put your comments in, and then they're auto-generated into a spreadsheet for us, and we send that to the consultants, and we discuss it in our group. So that's going to be that Monday, the 24th conversation. I attended an info session from the DEC for their solid waste plan, their solid waste management plan update. And so I'll put together just some notes for you guys so you can see what they're thinking of. They have a pretty extensive plan that they're trying to implement. It's going to reduce our overall waste generated in New York State, but it's going to ask a lot of people and changing the way you think about how you use things. And so I'll put together some notes and I'll bring them to next week's work session. But it's open for comments until May 15th. So anybody who's interested, you can go to the DEC website and search their solid waste management plan, and you can see the latest version of it. They did a good job of keeping it to only 90 pages as opposed to a lot of these reports, which are 900 pages. So you can actually scan through it pretty quickly. And there's also a PowerPoint presentation that breaks it down for you. So anyone who's interested in that, I recommend checking it out. And you can make public comment via email to the DEC on the report.
Meg, just to follow up on that, tomorrow's the Suffolk County Supervisors meeting, and I'm bringing Joe Fenora because we're going to have the same thing, DEC, solid waste discussion, manufacturing plant to recycle glass, and presentation from the Brookhaven Energy Program.
Yeah, so
You and he can get together.
yeah, it should be very interesting. And some of these things are things that we should think about implementing here as a small town, because, right now we ship a lot of our waste to Brookhaven, and Brookhaven is closing. So now everyone in the area is trying to scramble and figure out what they're going to do. So we kind of need to look at what we do and figure out if there's a better way. And maybe ask homeowners to be a little bit more responsible about what they use, how they use it, and how they dispose of it. So other than that, what else? The library has their posters up about their expansion, so if you want to see what it looks like, go check it out. And then that's it for me. There's green options tomorrow, Thursday, not tomorrow, tomorrow's Wednesday, Thursday at 9 a.m. if anyone's interested.
I sat in on the comp plan meeting last night, and at the end, one of the comments was that, the original plan had, the whole town involved and 80 people and hearings and this and that. And the first thought to me was that was because we didn't have a comp plan. We're starting from scratch, whereas now we have something to work off of. And I think, so I don't know that you want to get the 80, 90 people involved, but you do have the public hearings and the public meetings.
Not a lot of.
Well, and Jay clarified that. He said, there was only 1 or 2 meetings that had 50 or 80 people, and those were like the public infos, like the public hearing sessions. So we've already had 2 big public breakout sessions where we had multiple groups on Zoom, and we had, so we've done a lot of public outreach, and this summer, we're going to be doing an excessive amount of public outreach. So once we have a draft of the document, we're going to have multiple public meetings, we're going to have work sessions, we're going to have a lot of public input into this plan. But right now, we're working on getting the rough draft done. So we're wrapping it up. We have the last 3 chapters are the environmental chapter, which we're going to discuss Monday night. And then the housing chapter and the zoning chapter are going to be discussed next month. So, by the end of next month, hopefully we'll have a good rough draft that the consultants can work with to put together the complete document draft. And then that document will then go out to the public in so many different ways. We're going to have like specific meetings with different homeowners associations, with different town committees, with different interest groups like the fire department, people who are going to be impacted by it. So that's going to be coming up in the summer when, everybody's here. Because a lot of the time we get criticism that, you do things when nobody's here. Okay, well, we're trying to line everything up so that when everybody shows up in July and August, we have something to show them.
Good. Thank
So
you.
that's where we're at.
Good.
Jim?
Yeah, very quickly, change of command ceremony on Saturday over at the Legion, which was nice. New commanders actually is taking over. First Vice President Mitch Clark and Tom Spodek is our second Vice President. So I want to thank Dave Clark, Gunnar Wisman, and Mike Bebound for their service to the Legion. We had a meeting last night that went pretty well. I would like to sit down with you and Brian to talk about the bathroom, and the bathrooms at the bottom of the Legion. We've set pretty much the bar restaurant. We continue to make progress in that area, fixing the facility up. But the bathroom, what I'm really concerned about is the line, the line going into the bathroom and out to the septic. If we have to rip up the floor or something like that, that could be expensive. So we're prepared to do some other work there that we're getting gratis kind of help and volunteers to help us on. But that's something if anybody has a blueprint, I could ask Brian if they have anything that shows where that line goes, whether it goes from the bathroom right outside or it goes through the bottom of the floor, that would greatly be appreciated. We also had a rec meeting yesterday, discussed a bunch of things. One of the things I would discuss, privately with you involves, a personnel issue. The other one is about the Fit Center, that we're in the very preliminary stages of looking at what would be the needs of Shelter Island if we were to move, if we were to move forward in years coming to have the Fit Center. And the idea of even looking at the senior center. We did invite Kelly to the meeting, and Kelly got to meet all the people in the rec department, and we closed the gap there. We're going to try to get more activities for seniors, in our rec program. So I think that was nice. Her and Bethany got a chance to, to share some ideas. The other thing is, we did have a WMAC meeting last night, and BJ and I will definitely talk about that. It was designated, it was a special meeting designated for one topic and one topic only. That was the Pridwin commercial mooring application. We went through it. It was a fairly productive meeting. It was a good exchange of ideas. The bottom line was that there were 5 members of the 7 physically present here to vote. They did vote 5-0 to approve the application. I can tell you that there were some provisions that we all agreed to. Number 2, which was no overnight occupancy of any moored or dock boat. Number 3, no daytime occupancy for any moored or dock boat other than the purposes of arrival and departure. Private crew may remain on the boat. Number 4, we approve no running of engines, during the time that it's moored or docked. Number 7, no more than, and again, hold your seats, 16 boats may be moored moored or at the dock at any one time. He projects the average being somewhere between about 6 and 12 boats, but they would like the capacity. We did look at the mooring area. Bert was present, he's representing them. They laid out a proposed field. Bo was in the audience, so Bo was, looking that over. They like basically what they saw. One of the problems in putting moorings in that area is the depth of the water. Some of the water gets down to 25, 30, and even 40 feet at the outer edges going west. So, the need for a longer chain and things of that nature. And the last one was number 10, the Prydwen will strive at all times to operate moorings and dockage in a manner that is both safe and respectful of their neighbors. And we did go through a lot of other points that BJ may want to pick up on, as we go around there, but overall, that was pretty much, the gist of it. But BJ, it's a perfect lead-in for you to.
No, I got nothing on that, yeah.
Okay.
I got a huge question.
Huge.
Yeah.
We spent a year talking about expansion of use at the Rams Head Inn.
Right.
How can we not even entertain that on this?
No, it's entertained. It's entertained, and the application was really quite well done. It was some old photos there of, they have 2 docks. So old photos of boats at the dock, like on a busy day.
Yes.
And it was 16, as far as you could count. It looked like 16, small vessels, and it was so even less if it was today's boater, which is much bigger. So 16 is not a number pulled out of nothing. So when he says maximum usage between 8 moorings and 2 docks would be no more than 16, it's partly to address that conundrum, that question of expansion of use. So so why would you do that as an owner, quite frankly, to give up the dock? Because the conditions there in the height of the summer have gotten quite rough, really rough, with bigger boats going through a smaller channel. And more of them, a lot more than, let's just say, even a decade ago. So
On the backlash from the boat.
the moorings are, not an attempt, it will make boaters less afraid to pull up to the Prydwen and go get a meal if they can be at a mooring.
Again,
So that's that.
Yeah.
And,
So is the application in?
the application's in.
application is-
Yeah, and the WMAC with lots of questioning and
Yeah.
et cetera, voted unanimously to approve it. So yeah, a lot of those same questions were asked. And Rob Coburn is saying, if you come to the Prydwen for a meal and you're gonna, and you want to stay overnight, why would we let you stay overnight at the mooring? We are going to insist you stay overnight, you get a room or you move your boat. So, I think that answered, again, some other questions about that would be expansive, because nobody slept at the dock, back in the day.
Right, okay.
Okay. So are you done, Jim, or do
Yes, ma'am.
you want to go, Jerry, or should I?
You can go.
All right. So, yesterday was just the meeting day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got a lot. We started off with CPF in the morning, and let me just get some notes here. Let's see. We did great work on the acquisition plan update. We went through it page by page, which was really necessary. I had some great corrections to my very rough draft. But if it was mentioned one more time, that the pages weren't numbered, I think I was going to spit. Because it was a rough draft, is what it was. Yeah, the pages weren't numbered. It was pretty hysterical. Anyway, I'm really glad that we're moving on that. I just couldn't be more appreciative of the fact that that we'll have something done, hopefully within, I'm hoping 6 weeks in June, can come to the town board. A couple of things for me to correct, as I say, and a couple of things to add. West Neck Preserve, Tim Pertel brought us up to date on the progress. So we've got they've got a couple of plans to consider. Current conditions and 2 alternative visions of what the future could be. Tell you, it looks like it could be pretty darn special, if including what I think is a fabulous thing, a demonstration garden portion of what could be. So you as a homeowner could go there and just copy it. So anyway, just really good stuff. And then you just updates on the rest of their stewardship things that they're involved in, that they're doing. And then 2 p.m. was Water Advisory Committee. And dry status. The year-to-date, the rainfall is to be a little concerning. And now you're hearing that everywhere, that, we're at an increased risk for fires, et cetera. So here's the number. Let's see. We've had half an inch of rain in April through the middle of the month, half an inch. We normally have 3.5 inches, so that's significant. And through the end of April, we normally have 14.7 year-to-date inches, 14.7. And year-to-date through mid-April, we have 12.2. So, I mean, there's some time to make up 2.5 inches, but based on the patterns thus far in April, nobody's that optimistic. The 4 big wells are in the 40th percentile, so 10% below median, not how you want to enter the summer. And so the big question was yesterday, we adopted our drought status a rubric, so it should be a fairly automated way of doing this. But I'm just wondering, Christina, couldn't we put a button back on the main page for people to check? I would get ready to do it, in other words, or at least, I don't know that, we should probably do it because we're coming into the season to get the. We typically do it. Yeah, okay, good. So there's that. Trying to think, let me just look at my notes here for what else they covered yesterday.
You're right, though, if over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we don't see a significant increase in rain,
Yeah,
you're gonna be into a drought restrictions.
yeah, or at least, the warnings
Yeah.
that we flash and stuff like that.
Stage 1.
Right. Cornell Cooperative, Tamsin Ye came, zoomed in to talk about the education of us in the town, as the government, as well as the public, about fertilizer use. I don't have much more to say than that. I mean, the WAC is going to figure it out, go further with it and set up public education times. Citizen science, water quality testing in Manatee Creek, huge. I mean, it's really big right now, especially since we now know that the effluent from the school and the other buildings going into Manatee Creek and possibly being a large cause of the degradation of that habitat. So Alice Dupree and Linda McCarthy are heading this. They want to have 3, they wanted 2, but Meg's saying have 3 measuring devices, beginning at the entrance to the creek, middle of the creek, and then up at the head of the creek. And what are they measuring?
They're measuring temperature, dissolved oxygen, and conductivity. So
Right.
that kind of gives you a baseline for water quality.
Right.
And so if you live on Banana Creek and you would like to get involved in preserving your water quality, or at least evaluating it and figuring out how to work on fixing it, I would reach out to Linda or Alice or even the WAC, because their information's on the website and then they can put you in touch.
Yeah.
Doing this as a homeowners group?
As a homeowners group.
Should we be asking for help from the CE or the?
They are, they have.
TNC.
Well, they're really quite well researched.
The USGS is helping them.
Okay.
Because the USGS does all the other monitoring sites around us. So they're helping them set up their protocols and letting them know what kind of equipment they need and how to go about doing this correctly so that the data is useful.
Right.
So USGS is helping.
Yeah, and we've advised them to come before the WQI to help, to get monetary help for buying the instruments. That's number one. Number two, the other thing is, this was, the idea is to kind of move a little quickly. Well, the dredging of Manatee Creek will not take place, as far as I know, right now until the next season. So we have a little bit of time, but the idea is to get some good readings before dredging, get some good readings after. That will give us an idea of how effective the dredging is, and maybe give us, for the next go around, the argument to say, look, you need to go further in, because this didn't get even to halfway, make an impact even halfway up the creek.
I think that's a great strategy, by the way.
Yeah, they're really.
I love the pre and post, but I also like the idea of phasing it in. If you did 150, 200 feet, you did that this year. Next year you go another 150, 200 feet in, and another 100, you'll get down the north end.
Right.
And you beat the cycle.
Yeah, but
It'll be a lot easier.
Absolutely, but I'm going to say this, probably, people are going to want to punch me, but as long as we're going to continue to dump nitrogen in there, and I don't care if it's 19 or 50 or 60, as long as that's going to continue to happen, because the school is doing their own thing, then there's only so much we can do. I mean, maybe if we plant 1 million oysters, if we grow 1 million oysters, we can help. But Tom
Yeah, no, you're right.
Tom
Yeah.
Fields, dying horse, fix the cart, what are you doing?
Right.
Meg, you want to talk about the residential nitrogen testing program?
Oh, yeah.
That we proposed or start talking about?
So the last meeting we had, people were discussing the fact that the Lions Club is having their annual roadside cleanup day. And
April 29th, by the way.
April 29th, yes.
Come to the firehouse.
And so WAC members were interested in like either having literature with them that they could hand out to people as they do cleanup, or having it at the firehouse to hand out, just letting people know, hey, Shelter Island has a nitrate problem in their drinking water. Get your water tested. But what they wanted to do was like have nitrate strips, and then people could bring their water and they could test it. But I was like, they're just not reliable enough to really feel confident in doing that. So what we discussed was coming out with just a little flyer that has information on where you can get your water tested. If you contact Suffolk County Department of Health, they'll do it either free or very cheaply. There are other people out in the community who test water, and maybe give a list of all the ways you can get your water tested. And just start that educational process, letting people know, hey, it's better to be aware of what's going on. And so then the other concept that we discussed that I have to do far more digging into is the idea of kind of targeting a specific area. Like, we know that the center has an issue, and doing a mailing and trying to get people to sign up on a list to get their water tested, so we could maybe negotiate a bulk rate and have an actual water testing company come in and test all those people's water for them. And the question there was, is it possible to, use WQI funding to pay for the water testing? And then maybe that data could be, one, the homeowner would get it, but then maybe the town could also, have a copy of that data as like a baseline for us, so that we would know if we redid this testing in 5 years, we'd be able to see if we've made improvement or not in our nitrate levels in the groundwater. So there's a whole bunch of things that have to get sorted out for that to really be a viable option.
Yeah.
We have to see if the public's interested in something like that. See if there's a water test company or a vendor who'd be interested in working with us, and then information and sorting out the legal aspect, making sure that it's above board.
Yeah. And then Water Advisory Committee is also, as we know, investigating water supply to the center. Make the thought that the first thing to do is get the municipal buildings hooked up. And then once those, main lines are in, people along the way, pretty easy if they want, that kind of thing. But, very early days, again, right now focusing a little bit on what are we talking in terms of a bill? Let's start with the numbers. And then perhaps trying to get a sense of, within the triangle that we all know about in the center, within that triangle, get a sense of what the need, what the desire would be. Because that's kind of important. I mean, if you really, nobody's going to be interested, you can lead a horse to water.
Yes. To go back, what Jim said numerous times was, the wastewater treatment plant is only part of the solution.
Right.
We have to do something.
Yeah. So I just wanted, this is kind of like a side thing. I heard this on the radio this morning. There are some plants throughout the country, and some of them are rather large sewage treatment plants, where the sludge is brought to such a level that it can be used as fertilizer.
Milorganite.
Yeah.
What?
Milorganite.
Yeah, that is.
Milorganite is a fertilizer.
Made from human sludge.
Milwaukee.
Oh, right.
Milwaukee sludge. That's what it
Well,
is.
there's higher and higher levels of PFAS and PFOS in there, and there's no regulation yet about what that should be. And so a lot of organizations and companies who sell are now rejecting it. So what was a nice solution is now turning into not a great solution. So I go back to that again, wastewater treatment plant, anybody? You know, the idea that, and where are they coming from? This is not necessarily industrial derived levels. They're coming because we all have them in our clothes and we have them in
I
our
get a daily
makeup. Yeah.
email from Suffolk County Water Authority.
Yeah.
And they're upping all their filtration because of new requirements.
The increased.
Where we're going.
The final thing I kind of want to say about this whole, gosh, on the wastewater treatment plant is, in our discussions, we didn't discuss very much the passage last election of the Green Amendment to the state constitution, which states that every resident in New York State has the right to clean drinking water, air. And is it literally unconstitutional? I'm just throwing this out here.
You're right.
For the school to pick 19 when they could have 3. I mean, are you protecting the health of people when you know 19 is toxic? I don't know. I mean, I just.
They're, not in their defense, but they're looking at 60 or 80, that they're taking.
It's an improvement.
It's an improvement.
It's an improvement.
And it's
Still
something,
poison.
yeah, and you're right, but it's something they can implement now.
Yeah.
Rather than the allegations of further litigation and this, it's not gonna happen for 3 or 4 years if it ever happens, and, that whole strategy,
Right. Right. But
By the way, while we're on that subject of the wastewater, the IA systems over at school, is the arts and crafts fair gonna actually be able to run an art if they dig up the front
I
lawn?
doubt it.
well, they could probably go over to the fire department.
Yeah, but has anybody alerted her
No.
to the fact that if in fact they got their first bids in and they've been too high, so I don't know if they're going in that direction, but if they do, I think you should alert Brian to give her number and, or have Mr. Dunning call her and say, by the way, have a plan B.
Yeah.
Because plan A.
It was at Fiskfield back in the day. Do you
Yeah.
remember when it was huge?
Well, the reason I bring that up is because the green options, when I went to that meeting, yes, I haven't been to many WAC meetings, but as I sat there, I said, it's green options, all this stuff that you have here, and this person coming in and saying, they have handbooks and they have printed materials and they have all kinds of demonstrations, and the green options could really be a whole thing in itself.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you could really.
You could do seminars throughout the
You could do
day.
everything. I mean, you could open up the inside of the community center.
I'm saying we.
And, I mean,
Bring it up to Mike.
you could really, really expand it
It would be great.
and maybe not have it on. It's contagious.
I know.
A half hour.
Open to.
Don't make them crazy. Make it, dive in for a half hour, get out of the heat, listen to a little something on fertilizers. And again, this Tamsin has all, the services of the Cornell Cooperative Extension, which is actually a big part of their remit anyway, is public
I
education.
mean, that has a lot of information there going forward.
Yeah, that's kind of stuff's exciting, yeah, that's great.
Everybody's here. Anything else, BJ?
No, sorry,
Yeah, I have one.
so verbal.
We talked right after the budget season about realigning the ferry study group.
Yeah,
And we, just like everything else, it got put on the back burner. Well, lo and behold, at next week's work session, North Ferry's going to come to us for a rate increase. And they've already gone to the Budget Review Office who's recommending it to the county.
right.
So they're going to make a presentation next Tuesday to us, but I think we need to,
In the past,
yeah.
how would this happen if, there's a ferry committee, but what is the mechanism that we learn about this to also bring,
Well, that's the whole
bring an
point.
opinion to the BRO?
That's the point.
Yeah.
It never really works
We're
that
after the
way.
fact.
It's always after.
We're always after the fact,
We're
not
after
just the
the
fact that we don't have a ferry review
And I think
committee.
maybe that's a case we should make when the county has their hearings, that, we want to form this new committee and be more involved in the
In the
process.
early days, yeah.
Yes,
So they'll be here next week for everybody to,
all right, that's a good suggestion.
I have one more thing.
yes.
Yeah.
So I know that we've brought up in the past in other meetings, the fact that CDCLI is giving a grant to homeowners to build ADUs.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a public info session on that on Saturday, the 22nd at the library.
Good time.
At 1 o'clock, there's going to be an info session for builders.
That's this Saturday?
That's the 22nd.
Yeah, that's this
So, yeah,
Saturday.
that's this Saturday. So at 1 o'clock, there's an info session for builders who are interested in learning more about it. And then at 3 o'clock, there's another info session for homeowners who are interested in building ADUs and possibly taking advantage of this grant. So that will kind of help get some of the information out about the grant. There'll be, CDCLI will be there to answer any questions. And hopefully at that point, they'll have more information from the state because they were waiting for information from the state at the last housing meeting. So hopefully they'll have their answers cleared up and they'll be able to give a good
that's
overview
great.
of what the requirements are, what the restrictions are, and just how the program works. So Saturday, the 22nd at the library, also Earth Day, just FYI.
Oh, wow.
So fun. Yeah, and that's all I got.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll open it up to the audience. Since there's nobody here, we'll open it up to Zoom. If anybody has any questions. Julia, anything?
Nothing from me, thank you.
No, Stella was on there. Where'd she go?
No, there's enough with what you've all said. Thanks so much.
Sorry.
You're so polite.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll make a motion that we close the meeting. Oh, wait, I see a hand. Pam?
Hi, I'm just curious, are you not going to vote on the wetlands code law?
No,
This is the work
This is
session.
a work session, Pam, which, if they're at a town board meeting.
Okay, so then, all right, then I'll ask you this, are you going to consider reopening the public hearing for that code, since it's so many changes have been presented this afternoon in this work session? I'm curious to
we'll-
know if you'll reopen the public hearing. so
I
that
think,
the public
I think
can
we'll
respond.
consider anything, but we'll have to talk about it. I think BJ had mentioned she wanted to wait till Amber was here for a couple of things, so we have the full board next week.
Yeah.
You won't have me.
Oh, no?
So
Oh, you-
can we expect it to, sorry, can we expect it to be on the work session again next week then?
We don't, I
You know my
can't say for sure.
I don't know yet. Jim just mentioned that he's gonna be out of town next Tuesday, so
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, Pam.
But it's something we'll consider. It's definitely something to consider, Pam. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, if there's nobody else, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Ben,